This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Finally tonight, that awe-inspiring look deep into the cosmos. Tonight, the world is marveling at the first images from NASA's Webb telescope. Gio Benitez shows us the stunning pictures and what they might mean for the future of science and beyond.
Tonight, the splendor and breadth of the universe is on display like never before. NASA releasing the first astounding images from its new James Webb Space Telescope. This is the clearest, the deepest, and the oldest look humanity has ever had at the cosmos.
We're going back almost to the beginning. That is the discovery that we are making with this.
The stunning images captured could help jump the search for life in our universe into hyperspeed. This is the largest, most complex space telescope ever constructed. Equipped with the largest mirror ever to be flown in space, it's more than 6 times the size of the mirror aboard the Hubble telescope, snapping breathtaking images of the heavens.
The astounding detail that you can see in some of these galaxies, they just pop out. There's just so much more detail.
Including this beauty, the Carina Nebula, a stellar nursery some 7,600 light years away, Webb giving us a much crisper picture than Hubble, hidden baby stars in those cosmic cliffs now revealed to humans for the first time, according to NASA.
This telescope embodies how America leads the world, not by the example of our power, but the power of our example.
Cutting-edge infrared instruments and cameras operate in super cold temperatures colder than the surface of Pluto. A giant heat shield that blocks the sun's rays makes this possible. The telescope, an exploration powerhouse. NASA says it will change humanity's understanding of the universe and our place in it.
And you can do things we couldn't imagine of just last week.
Several times in the last 6 months, I nearly break my jaw of what I saw.
It may be hard to comprehend, but you are looking at a small snapshot of our universe from 13 billion years ago. The telescope able to look back to nearly the dawn of time and explore the first galaxies that formed after the Big Bang.
If you try and do this with Hubble, it's just not sensitive enough. If you try and do it from the ground, you can't get out to that distance or the dust is in the way. It's going to be hugely powerful.
It can also peer into atmospheres of planets, orbiting stars light years away, searching for chemical signatures of life. These first pictures, decades in the making, initial designs for the telescope began way back in 1996. A major redesign in 2005 led to the current approach, with construction completing in 2016, finally launching 6 months ago.
The people who designed this gizmo solve problems that have never been solved before.
So many starstruck with what they have seen and with what discoveries might be next for this technological marvel.
Just getting started. This is the proof that it works, and that when we take these kinds of data, it goes really deep.
Our thanks to Gio for that and the implications that will come. That is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.
He thought he was God.
He's now one of the most vilified men in the world. He is the everyman. Zelensky is the Tom Hanks of Ukraine.
The fact that a little nice Jewish boy is 5'7" is showing up this KGB agent in the Kremlin.
What do you say to Americans who see Russia and you not only as a rival, but an unfriendly adversary?
2 men at war.
Which Vladimir will take over. The world is not going to be the same.
This is a story I wish I never had to tell. It haunts me every day. As a Girl Scout, I loved going to camp. I never once thought anything bad could happen. But I came to learn what murder was.
3 Girl Scouts were discovered today.
This case is mystery upon mystery.
Was the real killer still out there?
Every day was a struggle. The first thing I'd open my eyes in the morning, it was just another day she wasn't there.
The person who did this to those children should be punished.
When I think of those 3 girls, I wonder what's the best way to honor them. That's why I've come back home. to find answers. Once and for all.
What happened to January 6th, you really have to rewind the clock to really look at where that anti-government movement started from.
We came from an era of Ruby Ridge, Waco,
Bundy Ranch.
Federal agents clashing with protesters, some from armed militia groups.
This constant drumbeat of the federal government taking away their rights.
Trump's presidency legitimized the fringe ideas, and it says it's okay.
You have Trump encouraging these agitators.
Let me tell you, this election was rigged.
Be there on January 6th. That is an invitation.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
It's easy to miss the slow boil. And in a lot of ways, the militia movement is arguably the slow boil.
If you have millions of people willing to believe lies, is there any surprise that you could have a January 6th?
Jason Van Tatenhove. Well, I'm a classically trained painter. At one point in time, about 15, 16 years ago, I was considered one of the top rising artists of the Denver art scene. My day consists of, waking up, taking in the news, and writing all day.
Hey guys, I'm Jason Van Tatenhove, Oath Keepers here.
I did it with the Oath Keepers, but I was doing it before then, and, something I've always done.
I have an important story that we need to get out there. Get back now! Many of you, like me, were very inspired by the actions that happened at Bundy Ranch. It was the first time in our country's recent history that good Americans stood up and said, you know what? We're not going to let this happen on our watch. And we went and we stood shoulder to shoulder with some of the best Americans in this country. Whether it's
Remember the video?
Yeah, I do. I just got to own it. You know what? I was swept up. I was excited. And I was wrong. And I feel awful about it. I think I needed a wider, pulled-out view to kind of understand things better.
The Oath Keepers are a potentially violent extremist group. Stuart Rhodes founded the Oath Keepers in 2009.
My handgun's here. I've got at least 2 spare magazines on this side.
The Oath Keepers have an active online presence, and they're constantly recruiting people from military and law enforcement with their videos.
The Oath Keepers aren't just made up of people at the fringes. They're actually veterans, police officers, people who work in these institutions that actually define American political structure.
Their entire reason for being is to train together to be prepared to defend their territory or defend their state.
If you rewind the clock, a key part of this constant drumbeat of the federal government was basically taking away their rights, and that they should be prepared one day to have to stand up and maybe even take physical action, was in 2014 in a remote part of Nevada, the Bundy Ranch.
A dramatic standoff caught on tape tonight. Federal rangers up against a rancher.
Ammon Bundy and his father, Cliven, were grazing cattle on federal land and refused to pay grazing fees to the government, the Bureau of Land Management, that by all accounts were legal.
I have no contract with the United States government. I'm paying grazing fees for management. That's what BLM was supposed to be. And they were managing my ranch out of business.
The Bundy family is convinced that the federal government has been overstepping their bounds for years, and it ended up being a confrontation with the federal government.
There was a message that was sent out by the Bundys, called for armed militia to come. The range roar begins tomorrow at the Bundy Ranch at 9:30 a.m.
A real Wild West showdown. Federal agents clashing with protesters, some from armed militia groups.
So when the call comes out, it makes perfect sense that the Oath Keepers would ride in to the rescue. In essence, they are the cavalry.
There was that big armed standoff, you know, those iconic images of the bridge and the BLM agents down in the corral. Their guns pointed across away at each other. It seemed like a very historic moment to me, and I wanted to go find out what was really happening, kind of boots on the ground.
This video went viral. The video shows the government clashing with protesters and even shows Ammon Bundy being tased. And in response, the Oath Keepers and other militia groups descended on Bunkerville.
This confrontation is the first time really that you see militias from around the country actually come in an operational role to confront the federal government.
We got the weapons down to get ready to shoot.
Law enforcement or the Bureau of Land Management, the folks that were trying to end things peaceably, they realized they were outgunned.
Late today, the government released Rancher Bundy's cattle, packed up and left, to cheers and jeers. A tense situation diffused, for now.
They do what is necessary in order for there not to be the kind of bloodshed that we see in a Waco or Ruby Ridge. But in doing so, it ends up giving the appearance that a group of militiamen had beaten the federal government.
Stuart Rhodes and Ammon Bundy, they broadcast that victory online for the whole world to see.
What happened today was a choice between bending the knee and standing up. And you folks stood up. The battle has been won, but the war is far over.
The American dream is dead.
The newest candidate for president, billionaire Donald Trump.
About a year after the Bundy Ranch standoff, Donald Trump comes on the political scene.
He rides down the golden escalator at Trump Towers and tells us things that just seem unthinkable.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. Knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously. We are going to drain the swamp in Washington.
Trump's candidacy really spoke to the militia movement and the anti-government movement.
Our purpose is to restore and defend the Constitution.
Now, Ammon Bundy is a hero, and he would be the one that would lead in effort to push back against any federal control to say, well, I too have resisted the federal government, and you can do it too.
Tonight, armed protesters have taken over a federal wildlife refuge, determined to stay as long as it takes.
Better way to die, though.
And prepared to use violence.
You guys got ARs, PKs, shotties?
The Malheur Wildlife Refuge takeover was really Ammon Bundy's own operation.
We love you! We support you! It began with a peaceful march, protesting land rights and the sentencing of 2 local ranchers convicted of burning federal land.
It was based on the fact that he was upset that a father and son were being sent back to prison for arsons on federal land that they had admitted to, and they didn't want Ammon's help.
The Hammonds have turned themselves in.
But Ammon was convinced that them going back to prison was federal overreach.
It is the duty of the people to put that government back in its place.
And so he went to the refuge and took it over to protest them being sent back to prison.
They tested the waters with Bundy Ranch, and they succeeded, and then they went and took it further, took over government property. It had a major, major effect on day-to-day life there.
So that is the refuge headquarters. You can see the beautiful tile roofs on the buildings.
It became a real problem for the community. I started pulling together community meetings. About 400 or 500 people met in the high school auditorium. And a group of people came in, about 40 or 50 people. And it just took my breath away as I watched them because I realized they were all going to the top of the bleachers and they had fully circled the entire high school auditorium. And then I realized Ammon Bundy's one of them.
Tonight, militia leader Ammon Bundy showed up uninvited to a community meeting in Burns and got shouted down.
Mr. Bundy, be very clear. I'm happy to meet you. Any place outside my county, it is time for you to go home. These people
Rising tensions in the armed standoff in Oregon that is showing no signs of ending.
We have no intent of pointing a gun at anybody, but let's be clear here. Who's pointed guns at me? Who's pointed guns at Ammon?
Hey guys, this is Jason Manteno with Oath Keepers Media. I'm here at the Malheur Refuge with my friend Lavoy Finicum.
Now, it's not like we were great friends or anything, but we had conversations and, interviews and stuff. And I actually, tried to talk Lavoy out of Malheur the day before. I was one of the last calls made to him, trying to plead with him, saying, look, this is not going to go well. It's not going to end well. But he had already made his decision. He was ready to stand and die there.
I'm not going to jail. Would I sit out here with my little rifle?
Lavoy Finicum was the spokesperson through most of the event at Malheur.
It's not a line in the sand. A line in the snow.
The guy that got sucked into Bundy's strange view of the U.S. Constitution.
The people have to take possession, and then the law will follow.
Wrote a book where he kind of hoped to die as a martyr.
Ammon Bundy, his brother, and Lavoy Finicum decide they need to go visit the county sheriff. They came upon a checkpoint orchestrated by the Oregon State Police and FBI.
And then Finicum took off.
Got it. Are they shooting? Got it. Hang on. Okay, they're shooting. Hang on.
He went around the vehicle and hit that deep snow. And
go ahead, shoot me. Stand. Shoot me. Shoot on the ground. You have to shoot me.
law enforcement believed that he had a firearm and he was shot.
Anytime there's anyone killed who's part of the movement, that person becomes a hero.
Do I think that Finicum is a rallying cry? Yeah, I think it is.
Group leader Ammon Bundy and his brother were arrested in the shootout and could be seen handcuffed on the road.
They were acquitted. They were found not guilty. Federal authorities also had filed charges against Ammon Bundy for the 2014 standoff in Nevada, and that case ended up getting thrown out. So no charges stuck to Ammon Bundy.
This is what you get when government officials ignore the people.
The political elites in this country have used their power to enrich themselves at your expense.
Trump's candidacy and his presidency legitimized the Frankenstein monster. It takes all of these fringe ideas and it says once they rise to the mainstream, it's okay.
People were becoming more and more radicalized. And that kind of, to me, was absolutely the last straw. I had to just turn and walk away.
It's actually kind of laughable in hindsight to go back and say that there weren't any warning signs. It wasn't just warning signs or red flags, it was a neon billboard.
It's just a progression. You start at a ranch, you go to a government facility, and then you're at the Capitol. I mean, it is a progression.
There's a straight line that you can draw from these standoff events to January 6th.
If you have millions of people willing to believe lies, is it any surprise that you could have a January 6th?
Now, with so much hope for a brighter tomorrow, it's time to
rise and shine.
We're traveling all across the country. Celebrate Good Morning America's Great Rise and Shine Tour.
You know, Trump was an unknown, at least to me, and he resounded, very well with the patriot community.
Trump had said so many outrageous and inflammatory and controversial things as a candidate. There was a sense, though, that once he was elected president, once he was sworn in, that the trappings of power would have a moderating influence on him. Congratulations, Mr. President. But that was blown apart on day one, just after he takes the oath of office.
This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
Donald Trump doesn't moderate once he becomes president. He is every bit as abrasive, as extreme in his views, as willing to offend absolutely everybody. He is playing to the fringes of American politics as president of the United States.
Charlottesville was a turning point in our country.
Replace us! You will not replace us!
And then, of course, when the president afterwards said,
very fine people on both sides.
That was just like, bing, bing, bing. This is cool for us to do.
That the violence was acceptable, and it didn't stop there.
I said, please don't be too nice.
These aren't people. These are animals.
Definitely in the years between 2017 and January 6, 2021, we've seen just a continued escalation of online, anti-government, white supremacist, anti-other extremism.
These organizations at the fringe right of America can say, we have a president who understands us. We have a president who believes in us, and we have a president who condones our actions.
There are cases around the country, cases involving threats, attacks.
Hit me in my back of my head, bro. It said, this is for Trump.
Where Trump's name is invoked by the person who's committing an attack.
I think I said, please get out of my country, because I don't like him here. And this is why I like Trump. And he's doing the same thing as I feel, wants him out of our country.
I found not a single case like that, not one case for President Obama or for President George Bush.
The whole Trump era is this fascinating study of people feeling like somebody's standing up for them and empowering them to speak their mind.
And then at the start of 2020, you have this incredible merging of all of these dark forces. It was basically a cauldron, and the fuel on the fire was the COVID pandemic. You have lockdowns and masking, and that gives fresh fuel to the Proud Boys, to QAnon, to the Oath Keepers.
They latched right onto that, and they started just pumping it, And that's part of the gig is they look for these hot button topics.
I remember the day that the CDC put out the mask recommendations.
So I just don't want to wear one myself. It's a recommendation. They recommend it.
He tweeted in April of 2020, liberate Michigan, liberate Virginia. He encouraged armed militia groups protesting in their state capitals.
Look at the organization that Ammon Bundy's been putting together in Idaho, and how much of a cornerstone the anti-mask movement and the showdowns at the local government.
We have to knock down the doors of the Capitol building to enter in, to exercise that right. Yes. And that's exactly what I will do, and I hope many of you will be represented.
This is crazy. Individuals ultimately see these things as encroaching on their constitutional, God-given rights. It's a ticking time bomb.
I've seen people where an election got stolen, and by the way, we're not going to let that happen to us.
And it's pretty obvious if Trump does not win that it was rigged.
Because we have a rigged election. It's a rigged election. It's the only way we're going to lose.
He knew that it was looking bad, and he was laying the groundwork for claiming fraud even before the first ballot was cast.
This is stealing millions of votes.
There were all these claims about mail fraud. It just didn't exist. It didn't exist before the election. It didn't exist after the election.
I think the most dangerous speech that Donald Trump ever gave was the speech that he gave on election night when he came out at 2:30 in the morning.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
He claimed a victory when it started to look clear that he was headed towards defeat.
My fellow Americans,
Biden won by a greater margin than Trump did over Hillary Clinton. Those are the facts. Yet you had this very steady drumbeat. It was stolen from me. It was stolen from me.
Let me tell you, this election was rigged. That was so great.
I thought people would be smart enough to realize, like, look, this guy's just desperate. He just wants to hold on to power.
Trump himself was anti-government. These ideologies allowed them to coalesce around the person, Trump, who they thought was fighting for them. And his supporters bought into his ideologies and his approach to governing that, you know, exactly what he said, that anything other than a win must be the result of fraud.
For nearly a decade, so many people had been told that their government was coming for their rights and that the federal government was basically demolishing this country from the inside, and that the day might come where they were going to have to stand up to stop that.
Donald Trump says a number of different times, be there on January 6th. And so we might say that that's just rhetoric, that's just Donald Trump talking. But to groups like the Oath Keepers, that is an invitation. That's their moment. It is a call to arms to head to Washington, D.C. on January 6th and prevent the certification of the new president of the United States.
We have men already stationed outside D.C. as a nuclear option in case they attempt to remove the president illegally. We will step in and stop it.
Rhodes has said that anything that was done on January 6th that was illegal or violent was the result of rogue members who were not acting in concert with his organization or part of anything that was planned or endorsed by the Oath Keepers.
People like Alex Jones, Stuart Rhodes, they have this ability to capture an emotion and a sentiment. They're very much going after the divide between rural and urban populations, and they capitalize on that.
And then you saw the birth of new organizations that Bundy himself has promoted that have engaged in all kinds of anti-government behavior, particularly in the Northwest, but elsewhere as well.
If you're Eamon Bundy, you're going to develop quite a platform in the darker spaces of the web where people are going to think that you were a hero. So when you speak, that matters.
Just wanted to express my support for what is happening in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Bless you for going to Washington, D.C. Don't wear a mask and stand for freedom.
People like Ammon Bundy and Cliven Bundy make calls to action, and many extremists look at that as not only a call to action, but potentially a call to violent action.
Bundy never explicitly encouraged or endorsed violence.
It might have been easy to just kind of assume they're going to stay in their sparse land, western part of the United States, and their biggest beef is going to be whether we're trying to make them pay taxes on land use. That was the wrong conclusion.
That very morning, you know, with the president and Rudy Giuliani's and others' speeches about, you know, fight like hell was just license.
Make no mistake, this election was stolen from you, from me, and from the country.
Let's have trial by combat.
Some people clearly came intending to do that. Others got swept up in it, I think egged on by the president.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
I knew it was going to be some sort of circus show.
You have members of different groups who came from across the country.
These guys have been wanting this. They're in tactical gear. They have body armor. They're there with assault rifles and handguns, and they're preparing for violence and kind of a violent overthrow.
They believe themselves to be patriotic to a fault, that what they're doing is saving the nation, the world, the democracy, the United States of America, we the people.
Trump really had a huge impact. There's no question that there's a through line between anti-government extremists, particularly militia extremists, and what we've seen in more recent years and since Trump was president.
When those people left that podium where Mr. Trump was and headed to the Capitol, I went, oh my God. Almost with the same heartbreak of when the first plane slammed into the tower on September 11th, of what have we allowed to happen.
That wasn't just some peaceful rally that got a little out of hand. That was people dying.
You're gonna die tonight.
It is being over-exaggerated of what happened at the Capitol building. Charge them with trespassing. But this political thing of insurrection and charging them with, treason and all of that, it's hyped up, and that's exactly what they did to us.
That rhetoric is clearly dangerous. Ammon Bundy saying this wasn't an insurrection, that this was the right of the people. Wow, say it too often and we're in trouble.
This is the most important thing that I'll do.
Ammon Bundy, he's now running for governor.
For the great state of Idaho.
And he has not moderated his rhetoric at all.
We don't need the federal government coming in and bullying us.
He's still holding the same stances and saying the same things as he did years ago in terms of the federal government and what people should be afraid of.
It's easy to miss the slow boil. And in a lot of ways, the militia movement is a slow boil.
Well, I think now is the time to straighten a lot of things out that are going on, because I know there's going to be a huge fight. I know that every move I make will be a battle.
We have to learn truly what happened on January 6th. There's no question it could happen again.
What happens if Ammon Bundy wins the governorship of Idaho? What does that lead to? What if Trump gets put back into office? For me, the answer was, it's not a world I want to live in.
I do not believe that anybody has a right to act in violence unless they're acting in defense.
Tomorrow morning, superstar, icon, Ashanti takes over GMA with a live performance you can't miss. Then Thursday, a special new Dancing with the Stars announcement. What will it be? And Friday, One Republic rocks the park on ABC's Good Morning America.
A glimpse of horror. Newly leaked disturbing surveillance video obtained by ABC affiliate KVUE takes us inside Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. It shows the 18-year-old gunman stalking a hallway, opening fire into classrooms the day he shot and killed 19 students and 2 teachers. Families have been demanding this video to try to answer so many unanswered questions about why officers waited longer to enter that classroom. An investigation into what happened and why police held their positions is ongoing. A shocking allegation at the end of the latest January 6th committee hearing suggesting that former President Trump may have tried to tamper with a witness who is not yet testified. Plus, for the first time, testimony from former top White House attorney Pat Cipollone describing a heated Oval Office meeting as unhinged, and a focus on former President Donald Trump, his supporters, and their possible ties to extremist groups that stormed the Capitol. Our Rachel Scott and a former federal prosecutor are standing by.
President Trump is a 76-year-old man. He is not an impressionable child. Just like everyone else in our country, he is responsible for his own actions and his own choices.
The FBI launches an investigation into a surrogacy clinic that promised it would save couples money by using surrogates across the border in Mexico. But families say they only drained their bank accounts, and now they're left with broken hearts. Another COVID resurgence is sweeping the country. This time, the highly transmissible BA.5 Omicron subvariant has become the dominant viral strain in the United States and is sparking a dire warning from Dr. Anthony Fauci to tens of millions of unvaccinated Americans. The threat to you is now. And an unprecedented look deep into the cosmos. Tonight, the jubilation after NASA releases stunning images from the Webb telescope. How this beautiful look into the universe could ultimately help answer that existential question, is there other life out there?
Several times in the last 6 months, I nearly break my jaw for what I saw.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We are getting a new chilling look at what happened inside Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, and we'll have more on that disturbing video in just a moment. But we do begin tonight with another explosive January 6th hearing in Washington, including a bombshell right at the end that has some questioning if former President Trump himself is tampering with witnesses. The hearing focused on the days after the state certified Joe Biden as the president-elect. In painstaking detail, the committee used depositions and witness testimony to claim advisors to the former president repeatedly told him that he had lost the election, yet he refused to accept it and instead listened to conspiracy theories at what's been called the craziest meeting of the Trump presidency on December 18th, where he reportedly discussed extreme plans in order to stay in power. For the first time today, we saw video deposition from former White House counsel Pat Cipollone. Among the ideas he said that were being discussed, the military seizing voting machines. And also testifying today, a former spokesperson for the Oath Keepers who said that day could have been a spark for a civil war, and the warning that he has about the next election. On this busy Tuesday night, Rachel Scott leads us off from the Capitol.
Today, the January 6th committee methodically laying out how President Trump summoned an armed mob to Washington, D.C., ignoring his top White House advisors who told him he had lost the election.
We're coming for you!
One of the loudest voices, his White House counsel, Pat Cipollone.
There's no evidence of election fraud sufficient to undermine the outcome in particular state.
Yes, I agree with that.
Trump's attorney general agreed. His daughter Ivanka, top cabinet secretaries. The president ignored them all.
President Trump is a 76-year-old man. He is not an impressionable child. And Donald Trump cannot escape responsibility by being willfully blind.
Instead, Trump turned to outside advisors like lawyer Sidney Powell, who embraced conspiracy theories and suggested seizing voting machines, all without providing any proof of election fraud.
At some point, you have to put up or shut up. That was my view.
Why was this, on a broader scale, a bad idea for the country?
To have the federal government seize voting machines, it's a terrible idea for the country. That's not how we do things in the United States.
The clash between Trump's outside advisors and his White House team coming to a head on December 18th at an explosive meeting in the White House.
I opened the door and I walked in. I saw General Flynn. I saw Sidney Powell sitting there. I was not happy to see the people in the Oval Office.
And at one point, General Flynn took out a diagram that supposedly showed IP addresses all over the world, and who was communicating with whom via the machines, and some comment about like Nest thermostats being hooked up to the internet.
The White House team arguing with lawyer Sidney Powell, who wanted to seize voting machines.
Cipollone and Hirschman and whoever the other guy was
showed nothing but contempt and disdain of the president.
And we were asking one simple question as a general matter. Where is the evidence?
And she says, well, the judges are corrupt. And I was like, everyone? Every single case that you've done in the country you guys lost, every one of them is corrupt? Even the ones we appointed?
Trump's advisors nearly coming to blows. The president taking it all in. And when the meeting broke up well after midnight, he fired off this tweet, calling his supporters to Washington on January 6th, telling them, be there, will be wild. The committee says for the right-wing fringe, that one tweet was an instant call to action.
And now Donald Trump is calling on his supporters to descend on Washington, D.C., January 6th.
He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and to show our numbers.
If necessary, storming right into the Capitol.
January 6th, there's going to be 1 million plus geeked up armed Americans.
The time for action is now. Where were you when history called?
One user asked, is the 6th D-Day? Is that why Trump wants everyone there?
Today, the American people hearing one Trump supporter, Stephen Ayers of Ohio, who testified he answered the president's call.
Why'd you decide to march to the Capitol?
Well, basically, the president, got everybody riled up, told everybody to head on down. So we basically were just following what he said.
As you started marching, did you think there was still a chance the election would be overturned?
Yeah, at that time I did, because everybody was kind of like in the hope that, Vice President Pence was not going to certify the election. Also the whole time on our way down there, we kept hearing about this big reveal I remember us talking about, and we kind of thought maybe that was it. So that hope was there.
Ayers is one of those who stormed the Capitol. He just pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct.
Basically, I lost my job, pretty much sold my house. It changed my life, and not for the good, definitely not for the better.
In the front row watching Ayers testify, another man whose life was changed that day, Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Ganell.
Last month, on June 28th, Sergeant Ganell's team of doctors told him that permanent injuries he has suffered to his left shoulder and right foot now make it impossible for him to continue as a police officer. He must leave policing for good and figure out the rest of his life.
As lawmakers spoke of his patriotism and sacrifice, Sergeant Ganell quietly wiping away tears. Today's hearing concluding with this warning from Congresswoman Liz Cheney.
After our last hearing, President Trump tried to call a witness in our investigation, a witness you have not yet seen in these hearings. That person declined to answer or respond to President Trump's call and instead alerted their lawyer to the call. Their lawyer alerted us. And this committee has supplied that information to the Department of Justice. Let me say one more time, we will take any effort to influence witness testimony very seriously.
Rachel Scott joins us now from inside the Capitol. And Rachel, we heard Liz Cheney alluding to potential tampering there. What comes next for the committee?
And the committee did refer all of that evidence over to the Justice Department, they say. So next, this wraps up this week's hearing. Next week, there will be another hearing we are learning on Thursday. That will focus on the 187 minutes that this very building, the United States Capitol, was stormed by rioters. And it will look into what Trump was doing at that time, including some effort to try to persuade him to call off the rioters that day. But just one more point that I really want to make tonight, Lindsay, is that we've heard through this emotional testimony just how much lives were changed, including Sergeant Ganell. And I did have an opportunity to speak with him after today's hearing. He will be leaving the force because of the injuries that he sustained on January 6th, but he told me that he does accept that apology from Stephen Ayers, Lindsay.
Yeah, we saw him wiping away those tears in that emotional and fairly charged hearing today. Rachel Scott, our thanks to you as always. Joining us now for more is Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, who was there today at the Capitol watching the testimony. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, sir. You had suggested...
Thank you.
So appreciate you coming on and talking with us. You had suggested this morning that you thought today's testimony would trigger you. We saw you getting emotional earlier. Did you feel ultimately triggered by what you heard today?
I don't necessarily know if I would just categorize it as triggered. I was angry, and it really bothered me when I saw Sergeant Gonell wiping away and dealing with his emotions. That was tough for me to deal with. Also, when the witness or he spoke about how his life was ruined or has changed and everything like that. Well, he has 4 officers sitting in the front row whose lives have changed also. You have Sergeant Gonell, who just revealed to the public that he'll never be working again. You have Officer Fanone, who's no longer as a police officer. Daniel Hodges is struggling with being the poster boy of being crushed in the door against these rioters. And also in the front row, you had Erin Smith, the widow of Jeffrey Smith, Metropolitan Police officer who committed suicide after responding on January 6th. So you tell me those people's lives won't be the same. So I forgive me if I fall short on the sympathy in right now. But yeah, I'm focused on the other people right now that always have done the right thing, and those are the people I'm focused on right now.
Understood. After the hearing ended, witness Stephen Ayers turned to you and other members of law enforcement sitting in the front row and apologized for participating in the insurrection. What was your response back?
While it was going on, I just didn't acknowledge it. I extended my hand, but very reluctantly. I can't necessarily say I accept his apology. It was received. I heard him, and I shook his hand. But yeah, like I said, I'm focused on other people at the moment, and maybe one day I will be able to accept it. I'm not one of these people that's going to say I'll forget you forever. I'll never forgive. I don't believe in that. I do believe in forgiveness, but at this moment, I'm sorry. I got nothing for you.
Did you feel any satisfaction by that apology? It's my understanding that going into today, you felt he owed an apology.
Yeah, so, not to me, fine, whatever. But he should have apologized on the microphone to the entire country, to the entire American people. This day is a stain, a black stain on a black mark on American history, and he is a part of that now. And he is guilty, or he is charged, he is pled guilty in that. So he needs to apologize to the American people, because this was a day that will go down. That day was a day that will go down in infamy. And he owed an apology to a lot more people than just me right there. And he had the opportunity to do it with the microphone on.
Sergeant Gonell was also seen today wiping tears away as Congressman Raskin praised him for his service that day and talked about how he cannot continue as a police officer because of his injuries, as you just mentioned. Before today's hearing, he felt betrayed by President Trump after hearing Cassidy Hutchins' testimony. There's been so much speculation about what may ultimately happen with regard to former President Trump and criminal charges. What do you feel should happen? What would you like to see happen?
Just like any other victim of any crime in this country, I want justice, and the committee is doing their job of determining, laying the facts out there about who was responsible for what. And once that full report is done and the Justice Department is doing their investigation, they need to level out the appropriate charges against any individual at any level, whether that would be congressman, senator, president, aide, intern, doesn't matter. Anybody who committed some crimes on that day needs to be held accountable. And what accountability looks like to me, I guess it's just whatever it takes to prevent people from doing it again. anybody, not just the person who did it, but anybody need to send a message that this cannot happen and we won't accept this in our country.
A large portion of today's hearing, of course, focused on that tweet from President Trump on December 19th. Big protests in D.C. on January 6th. Be there, will be wild. The committee says that tweet galvanized his far-right supporters to descend on the Capitol. Far-right extremists knew what was happening that day. I'm curious if you or your colleagues had any sense when you showed up to work the potential for how bad things might get that day.
No, and I think that's one of the frustrating things that so many people knew, apparently, and that's what we're learning through this testimony, how many people knew how bad it was going to be, and meanwhile, we're just sitting there, let's use the term sitting ducks, right? And we're just sitting there, and like I say, I feel like it's safe to say I've dealt with over 1,000 protests in my almost 15-year career at the U.S. Capitol, and the First Amendment protests, sure that people get upset, their tempers flare, but never did I imagine that I would face anything like we faced on January 6th. So no, I thought it was going to be a long day, but I didn't expect the level of violence to raise the way that it did.
And taking a step back just for a moment, I'm sure that you have lived and relived that day more than 18 months ago so many times. Do you feel heartened, though, that officials are finally coming forward and in some ways peeling back the curtain on what happened that day and what led up to it?
I don't know. That's a difficult. I look at different. Like, why did y'all take so long? Like, why did you take so long to do it? Like, you knew that this was, some people knew that this was going to happen. I'm sure there were people that had like a bad feeling, like Cassidy Hutchins. She said she had a bad feeling, or even Katrina Pearson that we learned today. This just doesn't sit right. Now, I don't know who they could have escalated it to, but there's, like, I honestly asked the question, there's really nothing that could have been done in advance to raise the alarm even more, to alert, to do something. There was nothing that could have been done. And like I said, I don't ask that in a condescending manner. I really want an answer on what could have been done to prevent this, because this didn't need to happen.
Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, we thank you so much for your time and your service. Really appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me on. It's good to talk with you.
These hearings, of course, have moral, political, and legal ramifications. For a closer look at the latter, Con Awadeh, former federal prosecutor of the Southern District of New York, joins us now. Con, today the committee really focused on former President Trump, his supporters, and the potential ties, directly or otherwise, that they had with these extremist groups that then stormed the Capitol. The president, it's been established with evidence now, knew that many of these protesters were armed going into the Capitol. What kind of criminal liability could Trump face?
The same type of criminal liability that the insurrectionists are facing. Frankly, he can be charged potentially with seditious conspiracy. He can be charged with obstructing the proceedings that were occurring that day to certify the electors. I think that evidence that Trump knew that weapons were there, that he believed and said, they're not here to hurt me, begs the question, well, who are they here to hurt? And then he took that further step of telling everybody who he knew was armed, hey, let's go up to the Capitol, I'll meet you up there. And that is devastating evidence, and I think that is evidence that's probative of an act in furtherance of a conspiracy.
And today we heard Representative Liz Cheney say that former President Trump cannot escape responsibility as it pertains to the law. Let's take a listen.
No rational or sane man in his position could disregard that information and reach the opposite conclusion. And Donald Trump cannot escape responsibility by being willfully blind. Nor can any argument of any kind excuse President Trump's behavior during the violent attack on January 6th.
And I want to focus in particular on that willfully blind. How can this committee at this point prove criminal intent?
And I'm glad you point that out, Lindsay, because Liz Cheney, Congresswoman Cheney, is actually talking in criminal law terms when she says Trump can't be willfully blind to what had happened in his responsibility. Because there is a concept in criminal law that if you don't have actual knowledge of facts that lead to criminal intent, prosecutors can prove that you actually have knowledge because you consciously avoided those facts. You were willfully blind. And that is one way prosecutors can prove criminal intent here, although it's quite difficult. I'll say this, that if all a prosecutor has to prove intent and knowledge is willful blindness and conscious avoidance, that's a tough case. What you want is actual knowledge. And that's why I spoke a little bit about what Trump said during the Ellipse speech when he said, hey, let's go up to the Capitol, when he knew that there were guns and armed, potentially insurrectionists who he was sending up to the Capitol. So that's actually actual knowledge.
And Representative Cheney also talked today about knowledge that the former President Trump had called a witness who had not yet testified publicly. She said also that that witness did not answer the phone. But how much does that up the ante potentially for criminal conduct in this case?
That in and of itself could potentially be a separate crime of obstructing justice or witness tampering, especially if, as alleged by Congresswoman Cheney, that it was Trump who made that phone call. The difficulty there is the phone call was never taken. So we don't know what would have been said with that conduct and with that contact.
Con Nowadays, we thank you so much as always. Appreciate your time. And we are now getting a first look at the moments that the Uvalde gunman walked into Robb Elementary and murdered 19 innocent children and 2 teachers. The video, which was originally supposed to be released to families this weekend, was obtained by ABC affiliate KVUE, who said that they elected to release the footage to provide transparency to the community, showing what happened as officials waited to enter the classroom. While you don't see the most graphic portions, we still do want to warn you that the video is disturbing. Here's ABC's Maria Villarreal.
Tonight, chilling video from the rampage at Robb Elementary. Surveillance footage obtained by KVUE and the Austin American-Statesman, capturing the moment the gunman crashed his truck near the school, opening fire on 2 witnesses who had raced to the scene to help. Moments later, a teacher frantically calling 911. Outside the school, you can hear the shooter firing at the building. At 11:33, a witness capturing the gunman entering the school with a rifle. Inside, he calmly makes his way down the hall. A little boy rounding the corner as the gunman opens fire, narrowly escaping as more than 100 rounds are fired. 3 minutes later, police arriving. 2 officers doubling back as they come under fire. 19 minutes after the gunman first opened fire inside, more heavily armed officers arrive, some with shields. 36 minutes in, officers are still seen standing in the hallway, guns drawn but still have not confronted the suspect. 48 minutes go by. He fires another 4 rounds, but still no rescue attempts. At 57 minutes later, more waiting. It's not until 12:50, 77 minutes after the shooter entered the school, 74 minutes after the first police arrive, that a team would finally breach the classroom and kill the gunman.
It has to be so frustrating for the parents to see the video that actually matches what they already knew. Maria Villarreal joins us now. Maria, what are you hearing from the families and local community leaders tonight?
I was able to speak with several families, Lindsay. One mother telling me that she does not plan to watch this video because it will not bring her daughter back. Another family is saying they were able to watch about 20 seconds, but really couldn't stomach much more than that after seeing the shooter inside that hallway. They even asked me to describe what I had seen just because they really just couldn't watch the rest of it.
Yeah, I think it's easy to understand why. Is anyone looking into who was behind the leak of this video?
Yeah, on top of talking to these families, I also reached out to the mayor, and he is very frustrated with how this has gone. He says from the beginning, he's asked for this video and information to be released to these families, and he has gotten nothing. And then all of a sudden, this video is leaked, and he's frustrated. He says the families have been blindsided. This was a disrespectful way to release the video, and he plans to ask for a full investigation of how it was leaked.
All right, Maria Villarreal, thanks to you as always. Another COVID resurgence is hitting the U.S. 65% of cases are now linked to the newest subvariant, BA.5. It's believed to be the most highly transmissible strain yet. Now the CDC is giving a new warning to tens of millions of Americans. Here's ABC's Eva Pilgrim.
With that highly transmissible BA.5 subvariant fueling a wave of new infections, tonight the White House is urging Americans to stay up to date on their COVID shots.
These vaccines, they continue to work to prevent people from getting seriously ill. If you get vaccinated today, you're not going to be ineligible to get the variant-specific vaccine as we get into the later part of fall and winter.
This as BA.5 now makes up about 65% of new COVID cases, and hospital admissions have doubled since early May.
We do know it to be more transmissible and more immune evading.
Tonight, health officials say Americans have the tools with masks, testings, and vaccines to weather BA.5.
We can keep people out of the hospital and especially out of the ICU. We can save lives and we can minimize the disruptions caused by COVID-19.
We certainly hope so. Our thanks to Eva for that. When we come back, the dramatic boat rescue after it overturned in the busy Hudson River. The FBI investigation into a clinic that claimed it would save couples money by using surrogates in Mexico, but left some families brokenhearted. Up next, the incredible images from space. What are they and why are they so important? Our in-depth.
Cepetan belanja di Gemar, nggak pakai lama.
In-depth look at this leap in science.
These days, with so much going on, it's hard to keep up.
While others are recapping yesterday's headlines,
we're bringing you the right now.
This is the busy border crossing. Steel barricades, another strike.
The right now look at the day ahead, how it affects you and your family.
Record high gas prices.
The threat of cyber warfare.
Is peace possible?
World News Now beginning at 2 a.m. Eastern, followed by America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
Streaming here on ABC News Live.
This is a story I wish I never had to tell. It haunts me every day. As a Girl Scout, I loved going to camp. I never once thought anything bad could happen, but I came to learn what murder was.
3 Girl Scouts were discovered today.
This case is mystery upon mystery.
Was the real killer still out there?
Every day was a struggle. The first thing I'd open my eyes in the morning, it was just another day she wasn't there.
The person who did this to those children should be punished.
When I think of those 3 girls, I wonder what's the best way to honor them. That's why I've come back home, to find answers. Once and for all.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Dramatic rescues in the Hudson River after a boat overturned. At least 12 were on board. 10 were able to make it out on their own with the help of a nearby ferry service, like you see here on this video. 2 people, though, a young boy and a female, were both killed when they became trapped underneath. The boat was chartered by a group with the owner of it behind on a jet ski. The incident is now under investigation. Now to the awe-inspiring look deep into the cosmos. Tonight, the world is marveling at the first images from NASA's Webb telescope. Gio Benitez shows us the stunning pictures and what they might mean for the future of science and beyond.
Tonight, the splendor and breadth of the universe is on display like never before. NASA releasing the first astounding images from its new James Webb Space Telescope. This is the clearest, the deepest, and the oldest look humanity has ever had at the cosmos.
We're going back almost to the beginning. That is the discovery that we are making with this.
The stunning images captured could help jump the search for life in our universe into hyperspeed. This is the largest, most complex space telescope ever constructed. Equipped with the largest mirror ever to be flown in space, it's more than 6 times the size of the mirror aboard the Hubble telescope, snapping breathtaking images of the heavens.
The astounding detail that you can see in some of these galaxies, they just pop out. There's just so much more detail.
Including this beauty, the Carina Nebula, a stellar nursery some 7,600 light-years away, Webb giving us a much crisper picture than Hubble, hidden baby stars in those cosmic cliffs now revealed to humans for the first time, according to NASA.
This telescope embodies how America leads the world, not by the example of our power, but the power of our example.
Cutting-edge infrared instruments and cameras operate in super cold temperatures colder than the surface of Pluto. A giant heat shield that blocks the sun's rays makes this possible. The telescope, an exploration powerhouse. NASA says it will change humanity's understanding of the universe and our place in it.
And you can do things we couldn't imagine of just last week.
Several times in the last 6 months, I nearly break my jaw of what I saw.
It may be hard to comprehend, but you are looking at a small snapshot of our universe from 13 billion years ago. The telescope able to look back to nearly the dawn of time and explore the first galaxies that formed after the Big Bang.
If you try and do this with Hubble, it's just not sensitive enough. If you try and do it from the ground, you can't get out to that distance or the dust is in the way. It's going to be hugely powerful.
It can also peer into atmospheres of planets, orbiting stars light years away, searching for chemical signatures of life. These first pictures, decades in the making, initial designs for the telescope began way back in 1996. A major redesign in 2005 led to the current approach, with construction completing in 2016, finally launching 6 months ago.
The people who designed this gizmo solve problems that have never been solved before.
So many starstruck with what they have seen and with what discoveries might be next for this technological marvel.
Just getting started. This is the proof that it works, and that when we take these kinds of data, it goes really deep.
We are just getting started. Astronomers, scientists, so many more fascinated tonight by what they are seeing. Our thanks to Gio for that. And joining us now for more is astrophysicist Hakeem Oluseyi. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's an exciting day.
It really is. The images that Gio just showed us are stunning. NASA officials are described as ugly crying when they got their first look at the photos. What was your initial reaction?
Well, I thought to myself, by George, they're going to do it, right? And here's what I mean by that. This telescope was designed to actually observe the very first stars and galaxies and to peer through the dust and look at newly forming planetary systems. And when I saw that very first image that was revealed last night for the deep field, oh man, I mean, my mind was blown. I was familiar with the Hubble image that preceded it. Hubble was revolutionary, and the James Webb Space Telescope has taken it orders of magnitudes beyond.
There are so many people who are not in your field, right? Obviously, we can understand the excitement from NASA and from you, but a lot of people might be thinking, why should we care about what the Webb telescope can ultimately find? How would you answer that?
We see the development of the technology and how trying to get this telescope off the ground is what actually pushed that technology forward. So, you know, there are a lot of what we call spin-offs from NASA's space work. And that's perhaps the most tangible stuff. But really, you know, as a scientist, the way we look at it is you just cannot foretell how the work we're going to do is going to pay off in the future.
What's fascinated you the most so far by what you've seen?
Oh, well, look, like I said, a couple of the images I was already familiar with from other telescopes, and just seeing how big of an upgrade Webb is. I mean, I don't think the people who built Webb expected it to be this good. There's so many points of single point failure in this mission, and the fact that everything is going off without a hitch, that is amazing. That is really amazing, and the scientific reach of the instrument, it's only been 1 week, and we're already seeing things we've never seen before. Like, give me a break. That's amazing.
Your excitement is contagious. Love to just see the enthusiasm that you have. Many people are seeing these images, and of course it sparks the question, are we alone, right? Or is there other life out there? How can this telescope help accelerate that search for life in the universe?
You know, that was one of the most outstanding things that was illustrated today, and that is that a spectrum, which is basically like a, you know, bumps and squiggles is what we call it. But, you know, I think of it like a barcode, right? If you have a barcode on a package in the store, that barcode tells you a lot about that item. Well, we get these things that we call spectra, and it looks like a bunch of lines and dips and dashes, but that tells us what elements are inside of a planet's atmosphere. What's going to happen here is that we have another telescope in space called TESS, the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, and it's been identifying planets around nearby stars. And so Webb is going to go in and taste the atmospheres of those stars by taking spectra, and we're going to look for biomarkers, molecules that could indicate the presence of life in those planets. So that's around the corner. I can't wait to see. Who knows, by the end of the year, we may have a candidate for life on another world.
Based on what you already know, and now combining that with what you're seeing, are you more of a believer that there is life on other planets, or is it still way too soon to know?
It's not too soon to know. Listen, the universe is the universe, right? The laws of physics here are exactly the same as they are everywhere else in the universe. The elements are the same. So if you ask me, I already observed that life exists in the universe, right? It's just a matter of us finding it out there. So life, I think life is probably everywhere. Technologically advanced life, oh, that's going to be hard to find.
Well, I know you're going to keep looking for it. Astrophysicist Hakeem Oluseyi, we thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate just how excited you are about all of it. It helps us to all kind of gain new perspective.
Thank you.
Still ahead here on Prime, the Texas woman who fought a traffic ticket she received when driving the HOV lane by pointing to her pregnant belly. She's now speaking out. The First Lady in damage control after some curious comments about Hispanic Americans. And it's Prime Day. So many deals abound. We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day from Melinda French Gates to Malala, wishing her a happy birthday.
Saat bisnis makin spektakuler, dari mana-mana orderannya meluber, tapi ongkir bisa hemat bener. Pakai yang reguler, kirim kemana aja mulai 5.000 aja. Ini dia yang baru dari Grab Express.
America is being poisoned with fentanyl, and we don't even know it.
Just heard my wife screaming. She told me they had just died.
50 to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Keep breathing, come on. It's poison, it's pure poison.
A few grains of salt worth of fentanyl will kill you.
Just my agency has seized enough to kill the entire country.
ABC News Live presents Poisoned, America's Fentanyl Crisis. The powerful series, streaming free on ABC News Live.
This is a story I wish I never had to tell. It haunts me every day. As a Girl Scout, I loved going to camp. I never once thought anything bad could happen, but I came to learn what murder was.
3 Girl Scouts were discovered today.
This case is mystery upon mystery.
Was the real killer still out there?
Every day was a struggle. The first thing I'd open my eyes in the morning, it was just another day. She wasn't there.
The person who did this to those children should be punished.
When I think of those 3 girls, I wonder what's the best way to honor them. That's why I've come back home, to find answers. Once and for all.
These days, with so much going on, it's hard to keep up.
While others are recapping yesterday's headlines,
We're bringing you the right now.
This is the busy border crossing. Steel barricades, another strike.
the right now look at the day ahead, how it affects you and your family.
Record high gas prices.
The threat of cyber warfare.
Is peace possible?
World News Now beginning at 2 a.m. Eastern, followed by America This Morning,
America's #1 early morning news.
streaming here on ABC News Live.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
As of today, in a big way, we have inaugurated abcnews.com.
A lot has changed in our world since Peter made that announcement. But what hasn't changed is the commitment to groundbreaking reporting and innovation at abcnews.com. And here's to everything ahead.
Welcome back, everyone. It's an event that many of us love, Amazon Prime Day. And how could we here at ABC News Live Prime not report on something that shares our name? Here's the shopping event for Amazon Prime members by the numbers. During a 48-hour span, shoppers can save up to 79% on various items from electronics, toys, beauty, fashion, even household goods. This year, an added benefit is gift cards. Customers can enjoy up to 25% off on brands like Amazon, Airbnb, Grubhub, Old Navy, and many more. Save up to 50% on select headphones from Beats, Sony, JBL, and 30% on e-bikes, Segways, and scooters. And also save up to 50% on select products from Keurig and 40% on iRobot Roomba, because honestly, why sweep when a robot can do it for you? This Prime Day, millions of orders will be picked, packed, and shipped by Amazon employees and partners who work to create the best possible experience for customers, so we're told. $300 million is what Amazon claims they invested in safety projects to protect the workers who will pack your goods. The e-commerce giant also claims it expanded their health and safety team to nearly 8,000 employees. Amazon also invested more than $1 billion in safety technology and delivery vans, driver training programs, and continuous improvements so that drivers deliver safely and seamlessly. Amazon Prime boasts 200 million paid members around the world. And if you are not a Prime member yet, you can join or start a 30-day free trial to get started on those savings. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. Peloton announces a major change in terms of where they make their popular products, and our conversation with singer and now host Betty Who about a project that she's working on. But first, look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough. You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
So what's good to read this summer? Well, Kate and I have decided to jump in and help you.
And we're talking with Oprah, John Irving, and so many popular authors and influencers.
So we want you to join us for the new podcast series. It is called The Bookcase with Kate and Charlie.
We will make sure you love what you read.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
A bombshell moment at the close of the House Committee's 7th hearing.
After our last hearing, President Trump tried to call a witness in our investigation. A witness you have not yet seen in these hearings.
Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney saying they will take any effort to influence witness testimony very seriously, and that the Justice Department has been alerted after that witness who did not pick up Trump's call contacted their attorney. A dramatic close to a dramatic hearing that focused on a crucial timeline tracking the activities of Donald Trump and his allies from December 14th, 2020 through January 6th, 2021. Clips from last week's videotape testimony of Trump's White House counsel Pat Cipollone feature prominently in the hearing.
The First Lady raising some eyebrows after an attempt at a compliment fell flat.
First Lady Jill Biden facing criticism after telling a group of Latino voters they were, quote, as unique as breakfast tacos. The comment came during a prepared speech in San Antonio, Texas, where the largest Latino civil rights group in the country gathered for a conference. Now the National Association of Hispanic Journalists is responding in a tweet, encouraging, quote, Dr. Biden and her speechwriting team to take the time in the future to better understand the complexities of our people and communities.
Japan has bid their final goodbye to former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe as a family funeral was held at a temple days after his assassination. Hundreds of people filled the walkways outside the temple in downtown Tokyo, waving and taking pictures as Abe's hearse drove by.
The hearse briefly stopped at the former Prime Minister's Liberal Democratic Party headquarters, the Prime Minister's office, and the Parliament building before transporting Abe's body to the funeral home where he was to be cremated. A pregnant Texas woman generating questions about who counts as a person.
Brandy Batone was 34 weeks along when she alone took the high occupancy vehicle, or HOV lane, on Highway 75 in Dallas County. When pulled over by a DPS officer and asked who else is in the car,
I was like, right here she is.
Brandy, in the moment, wasn't trying to take a stand, only trying to fight a ticket. For context, Roe v. Wade had just been overturned, and Texas has an impending ban on abortions. She felt it right to think the child she's carrying is a passenger. The officer wasn't buying it. Brandy got a $275 ticket for an HOV violation.
Peloton says it will be outsourcing the production of its bikes and other products. The fitness company announcing that it was expanding its partnership with Taiwanese manufacturer Rexon, which will now be taking over production of Peloton's bikes and treadmills. Peloton saying the move will help lower costs and simplify its supply chain. The company saw a major surge in sales during the height of the COVID-19 lockdowns, but has struggled since after demand began to drop off.
Emmy nominations announced this morning. Television Academy favorite Succession leading the nominees with 25 nominations. Ted Lasso leads comedies with 20 nominations. Netflix hit Squid Games, the first foreign language series to be nominated for Best Drama Series. Euphoria star and executive producer Zendaya at 25, the youngest woman to be nominated as a producer.
Welcome back. And next to the FBI investigation into a surrogacy clinic, they claim that it would save couples money by using surrogates in Mexico, but some clients say that they were only scammed. It's a story that we first saw in the LA Times. Kaylee Hartung has this report.
To just leave us standing at the last minute like that, with a lot of uncertainties, a lot of concerns about being able to bring our children home. That was a big betrayal by her.
Families left reeling after they say they were taken advantage of in a surrogacy scandal. The FBI is now investigating Surrogacy Beyond Borders, founded by Lily Frost, a program claiming to connect prospective parents to surrogates in Mexico, while saving over 60% compared to U.S. options. The LA Times reports that it spoke with some of Frost's former clients who say they paid her thousands of dollars that she mishandled as her business failed.
As a result of her not being able to keep up with some of the promises she made, many of the families didn't have any child or even healthy embryos to show for it moving forward.
Frost declining an interview with ABC News, but telling the LA Times that due to problems beyond her control, including an inexplicable decrease in IVF success rates and challenges of the pandemic, she lost her ability to cover escalating expenses. Adding she was devastated and even drained her retirement account and sold her house to try to pay the bills. According to the CDC, more than 9,000 pregnancies were attempted via surrogate in the U.S. in 2019, up from just 2,600 in 2010, each typically costing upwards of $150,000.
I've always wanted kids before I even met Paul, and I've always had money set aside for a kid.
Husbands Paul Hard and Jonathan Guyette say they paid Frost more than $150,000 to help them have 2 children. But just a week before their second baby was born, they say they got some disturbing news.
The caseworker in Mexico was saying, we're not receiving money. And they were being told that we had not paid. And she would say, well, the money will be there in 3 days. The money will be there in 3 more days. The money will be there tomorrow. And then she stopped communicating.
They say they went to Mexico and paid more money out of pocket to cover the expenses that remained, bringing the baby safely home.
We've got a lot of gratitude that we've got 2 beautiful children and they're doing great. It is distressing to think that someone would take advantage of folks and misuse them like this.
Experts say when considering using a surrogate, it's important to do your research.
You want to make sure that your team has excellent experience, a good reputation, years and years of doing this, lots of transparency, openness, honesty, good communication. These are all the hallmarks of a good surrogacy team.
Life is full of chance encounters and, of course, lots of what-if moments. But what if the love of your life is someone you've already met but never dated? What if you opted to give love a chance with someone from the past? Could it lead to happiness in the future? Well, Prime Video's new dating series, The One That Got Away, dares to ask the question, what if the person you're meant to spend the future with is from your past? Let's take a look.
One by one, people from your past will enter through the portal.
Shut up. Joining us now is the host of the series, Australian-born pop icon Betty Who. Betty, thank you so much for joining us. I love the concept, as we were just discussing just a little bit. As a singer and writer, how did you end up getting cast in this role as host?
I know it's very unusual for me. I was very, very glad and grateful to have been asked to audition and come in and have a conversation about being the host of a dating show. When they asked me, of course, they told me nothing about the show. So it wasn't until many weeks later and many audition tapes later that I had actually booked that they were like, okay, so we're going to tell you about the show that you're about to host, which was a really fun experience to sort of come in totally fish out of water. It's the first time in a long time in my career that I have really felt this sort of vulnerable and unprepared. And I really had to just see if I could do it and believe in myself. And I had an amazing team who helped me transition from singer-songwriter into professional host.
Love it. And The One That Got Away, it's unlike any other reality dating show. Contestants get an opportunity to explore a second shot at love as people from their past enter through the portal. But there's a catch. They don't know when someone will come out of the portal and how many people from their past will be there. What is the science behind the portal and the people who you decide to have come through it?
The portal is, I don't know if you know this, but I'm kind of the keeper of the portal. That is sort of my job on the show. It's very powerful. I feel I'm drunk with power, honestly. But so the fun part of especially this first season, as you know, this is a new experiment. Our contestants not know when someone's going to come out, who is going to come out of the portal, to see them react to these different people from their past, some positive, some negative, some relationships from the past are there because that's where they're meant to be left. And so that's also a really fun part of the show, is watching people realize that actually 10 years ago, they made the right decision letting this person go.
Yes, I think that would be my sentiment, watching a few of my exes come through like, wah, wah. But how do you decide who you bring through? Because if I'm a contestant on the show, do I write down a list of all the former flames in my past?
Well, that is a great question. I think the number one question I keep getting about the show is about the casting process. And I'm not totally sure. I think our team wants to make it a little bit of a mystery because it is such a wild kind of concept. And then when it starts to happen and you start to see these people come through, you're like, how did this work?
Right.
Where did they get all of these people from? And I think that that's one of the fun mysteries and exciting parts of the show.
And the series shows the dynamics of dating an ex and the dynamic of relationships within the LGBTQ plus community, which is obviously important, right? To feature a mix of different kinds of couples.
Yeah, something that I was really excited to hear when they booked me, and something that the entire team told me coming in, is they wanted to have a diverse cast. They wanted to show all races, different sizes, different kinds of people, different kinds of relationships, particularly queer relationship. Is this Jeff, as you're seeing on your screens, Jeff's entire storyline is one of my personal, near and dearest to my heart favorite storylines, because I think he's so brave to have come on this show and share his story, especially because his coming out story is really moving to me. And I think seeing a queer relationship sandwiched in between all of these heterosexual relationships that we've been seeing dating shows made about for the last however many years really moved me.
Betty, my last question for you, all right? Play along here. If you were single, and you may be, I'm not sure, but what would you do if you were suddenly reunited with an ex? Any old flames that you might like to rekindle?
I know. Oh, that is the question, isn't it? I am married, so it definitely is a more difficult question to answer. The other thing that I have been wondering is if other people are watching the show at home, if they're like, well, who would come through the portal for me? You never forget your first love. You never forget the first person who broke your heart. You never forget the person that you have this unsaid thing with. So now that I'm a little bit older, I think if there were going to be people coming through the portal from my past, it would mostly be me apologizing, being like, I feel like I really did this wrong when I was young, and you're so wonderful, and I want to respect you more and make you realize that it truly was not you, it was me.
The old, yeah, that's what I was going to say. It wasn't you, it's me.
Exactly.
Speech. Betty, so fun, such a lovely concept. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. The one
Thanks
that
for
got
having
away,
me, you guys.
the one that got away, now streaming on Prime Video. Before we go tonight, our image of the day. Former Oath Keeper spokesperson Jason Van Tatenhove and Stephen Ayers swearing in before their testimony during the latest January 6th hearing. Ayers, as you heard earlier, pled guilty to entering the Capitol on that day. The House committee is now probing the 2021 assault, looking at links between far-right groups and associates of the former president. That is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, more on today's January 6th hearing and the claim from Republican Liz Cheney that former President Trump may have directly tried to witness tamper, and that disturbing new video from the hallways of Robb Elementary in Uvalde. Why was it released now?
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
Elizabeth Holmes found guilty on 4 counts of fraud, facing the possibility of decades in prison. Now, we take you inside the courtroom and behind the scenes. The Dropout, Elizabeth Holmes on trial. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
National parks are incredibly safe places. A crime will happen.
Hey, my wife had fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
this is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Hi there, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. An emotional moment in a courtroom after a judge ruled a Cleveland man was wrongfully imprisoned for 27 years. Charles Jackson was released in 2018 after the Innocence Project found police reports lied and fabricated evidence. Jackson and his attorneys have filed federal civil rights lawsuits against the city and the detectives that investigated his case. Twitter has filed a lawsuit against Elon Musk in an attempt to force him to complete the $44 billion acquisition of the social network he agreed to back in April. The billionaire backed out last week, claiming Twitter failed to provide enough information about fake accounts. The company has said it believes about 5% of the accounts are fake. Irate community members at a meeting in Riverside County today called for the resignation of officials over a scathing report on failures in the care of the 13 Turpin children who were abused for years by their parents before being rescued in 2018. Investigators said that social services failed to aid the children in their transition, but said the situation is improving. The probe was the result of an ABC News investigation that aired as part of the Diane Sawyer 2020 special, Escape from a House of Horror, where 2 of the siblings spoke out about their experiences. Now to the latest in the January 6th committee hearings. Today, the committee presented more evidence and testimony about a fiery closed-door meeting on December 18th, where former President Trump and close aides Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and former General Mike Flynn were allegedly discussing seizing voting machines in states that Trump lost. ABC congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has the explosive details.
Today, the January 6th committee methodically laying out how President Trump summoned an armed mob to Washington, D.C., ignoring his top White House advisors who told him he had lost the election. We're coming for you! One of the loudest voices, his White House counsel, Pat Cipollone.
There's no evidence of election fraud sufficient to undermine the outcome in a particular state.
Yes, I agree with that. Trump's attorney general agreed. His daughter Ivanka, top cabinet secretaries. The president ignored them all.
President Trump is a 76-year-old man. He is not an impressionable child. And Donald Trump cannot escape responsibility by being willfully blind.
Instead, Trump turned to outside advisors like lawyer Sidney Powell, who embraced conspiracy theories and suggested seizing voting machines, all without providing any proof of election fraud.
At some point, you have to put up or shut up. That was my view.
Why was this, on a broader scale, a bad idea for the country?
To have the federal government seize voting machines, it's a terrible idea for the country. That's not how we do things in the United States.
The clash between Trump's outside advisors and his White House team coming to a head on December 18th at an explosive meeting in the White House.
I opened the door and I walked in. I saw General Flynn. I saw Sidney Powell sitting there. I was not happy to see the people in the Oval Office.
And at one point, General Flynn took out a diagram that supposedly showed IP addresses all over the world, and who was communicating with whom via the machines, and some comment about like Nest thermostats being hooked up to the internet.
The White House team arguing with lawyer Sidney Powell, who wanted to seize voting machines.
Cipollone and Hirschman and
Whoever the other guy was showed nothing but contempt and disdain of the president.
And we were asking one simple question as a general matter. Where is the evidence?
And she says, well, the judges are corrupt. And I was like, everyone? Every single case that you've done in the country you guys lost, every one of them is corrupt? Even the ones we appointed?
Trump's advisors nearly coming to blows. The president taking it all in. And when the meeting broke up well after midnight, he fired off this tweet, calling his supporters to Washington on January 6th, telling them, be there, will be wild. The committee says for the right-wing fringe, that one tweet was an instant call to action.
And now Donald Trump is calling on his supporters to descend on Washington, D.C., January 6th.
He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and to show our numbers.
If necessary, storming right into the Capitol.
January 6th, there's going to be 1 million plus geeked up armed Americans. The time for action is now. Where were you when history called?
One user asked, is the 6th D-Day? Is that why Trump wants everyone there?
Today, the American people hearing one Trump supporter, Stephen Ayers of Ohio, who testified he answered the president's call.
Why'd you decide to march to the Capitol?
Well, basically, the president, got everybody riled up, told everybody to head on down. So we basically were just following what he said.
As you started marching, did you think there was still a chance the election would be overturned?
Yeah, at that time I did, because everybody was kind of like in the hope that, Vice President Pence was not going to certify the election. Also the whole time on our way down there, I kept hearing about this big reveal I remember us talking about, and we kind of thought maybe that was it. So that hope was there.
Ayers is one of those who stormed the Capitol. He just pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct.
Basically, I lost my job, pretty much sold my house. It changed my life, and not for the good, definitely not for the, for the better.
In the front row watching Ayers testify, another man whose life was changed that day, Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Ganell.
Last month, on June 28th, Sergeant Ganell's team of doctors told him that permanent injuries he has suffered to his left shoulder and right foot now make it impossible for him to continue as a police officer. He must leave policing for good and figure out the rest of his life.
As lawmakers spoke of his patriotism and sacrifice, Sergeant Ganell quietly wiping away tears. Today's hearing concluding with this warning from Congresswoman Liz Cheney.
After our last hearing, President Trump tried to call a witness in our investigation, a witness you have not yet seen in these hearings. That person declined to answer or respond to President Trump's call and instead alerted their lawyer to the call. Their lawyer alerted us, and this committee has supplied that information to the Department of Justice. Let me say one more time, we will take any effort to influence witness testimony very seriously.
Our thanks to Rachel Scott. One big focus of today's hearing was around extremists and how former President Trump reacted to them. Our Chief Justice correspondent, Mr. Pierre Thomas, joins us. Now, Pierre, the January 6th committee argued during today's hearing that former President Donald Trump's tweet on December 19th, 2021, calling for his supporters to protest in Washington by writing, "Be there, will be wild," would galvanize his followers, unleash a political firestorm, and then change the course of our history as a country. How could the Department of Justice use this tweet in any potential case against the former president?
Lizzie, that's a very complicated question. In this regard, was President Trump simply trying to get the people to show up at the Capitol to put political pressure on Pence to do his bidding? Or was this an illegal act when he knew that there was no chance that he could win the election? Was he simply using the power and prestige of his office to commit an illegal act? That is what the Justice Department is going to have to resolve. And there's nothing in modern history that they have as precedent to lean on here. So what we're being told is that that the investigation is being very, very straightforward in terms of trying to prove who committed acts of violence, who organized acts of violence, who financed it, and were there any political operatives in Trump's world or otherwise who knew about it. And then there are all these schemes about, fake electors and the pressure put on Mike Pence. There's a fundamental legal and intellectual question being resolved here. What was the president's intent? Did he really believe that there was this fraud, that somehow his attorney general and his White House counsel had not been able to glean and understand, and that he still was on this crusade for democracy? Or was he a despot simply trying to stay back in office?
And the committee also laid out that after that tweet, the former president's supporters, some with massive online followers like Alex Jones, erupted online with sometimes violent rhetoric, hyping the newly announced protest. Let's take a look at one of the videos that the committee played.
December 19th, the year is 2020, and one of the most historic events in American history has just taken place. President Trump, in the early morning hours today, tweeted that he wants the American people to march on Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021. He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and to show our numbers.
Pierre, do you feel that the committee has brought forward any or enough evidence forward that links the Trump administration to the extremist groups that organize the violence?
Now, there were hints today where they mentioned Roger Stone allegedly being in contact with Oath Keepers and others, Oath Keepers who provided security for him that day, alleged allegations that he was in contact with Proud Boys. But thus far, the committee has not shown a direct nexus between the people who organized the violence, who committed the acts of violence, and operatives within the White House or people in the political circle. That is what the Justice Department is also looking at. We just haven't seen the committee thus far present clear, direct evidence of such.
And what is the fundamental question the Department of Justice has to resolve at this point in order to bring any charges against Trump's inner circle or the former president himself?
Again, we have to see if the Justice Department has developed evidence. And we know that we've had Oath Keepers plead guilty to seditious conspiracy. We know we have a member of the Proud Boys who's pled guilty to a conspiracy to block the certification of Joe Biden. What have those cooperative agreements yielded? They are cooperating with the government. They're giving behind closed doors testimony and evidence. We don't know the results of that. This investigation is still far from over, ongoing, if you will. And that is the big question. What have they found behind the scenes that would indicate, if anything, that members of the Trump organization or President Trump or the administration knew, in fact, that the Oath Keepers were going to go commit acts of violence? Now, the committee is trying to make the case that the president, through his sheer force of will and action, with all the knowledge that there was not election fraud, was engaging in a conspiracy to thwart the will of the people. That is the argument that the committee is making. It's a political argument. The question now is, will it be a criminal argument?
And it seems like they're going to need to still be able to get some call records and logs, perhaps still in order to make some definitive connections there. Pierre Thomas, our thanks to you as always.
Pleasure.
We are getting a first look at the moments of the Uvalde gunman walked into Robb Elementary and murdered 19 innocent children and 2 teachers. The video, which was originally supposed to be released to families this weekend, was obtained by ABC affiliate KVUE, who said that they elected to release the footage to provide transparency to the community, showing what happened as officials waited to enter the classroom. While you don't see the most graphic portions, we do want to warn you that the video is disturbing. Here's ABC's Maria Villarreal.
Tonight, chilling video from the rampage at Robb Elementary. Surveillance footage obtained by KVUE and the Austin American-Statesman, capturing the moment the gunman crashed his truck near the school, opening fire on 2 witnesses who had raced to the scene to help. Moments later, a teacher frantically calling 911. Outside the school, you can hear the shooter firing at the building. 11:33, a witness capturing the gunman entering the school with a rifle. Inside, he calmly makes his way down the hall. A little boy rounding the corner as the gunman opens fire, narrowly escaping as more than 100 rounds are fired. 3 minutes later, police arriving. 2 officers doubling back as they come under fire. 19 minutes after the gunman first opened fire inside, more heavily armed officers arrive, some with shields. 36 minutes in, officers are still seen standing in the hallway, guns drawn, but still have not confronted the suspect. 48 minutes go by. He fires another 4 rounds, but still no rescue attempts. At 57 minutes later, more waiting. It's not until 12:50, 77 minutes after the shooter entered the school, 74 minutes after the first police arrive, that a team would finally breach the classroom and kill the gunman.
So difficult to see that video. Our thanks to Maria. Now to an awful scene that unfolded right here in New York on the Hudson River today. A boat on the Hudson capsized. Children are among the dead. ABC's Ariel Reshef reports.
Tonight, tragedy on New York City's Hudson River. 2 people dead after this small jet boat capsized. The victims, a 7-year-old boy and a 50-year-old woman. Authorities and New York Waterway Ferries frantically attempt to pull 12 people from the water. First responders rendering first aid.
We saw a couple people on the water, and they just kept popping out. It was a capsized boat.
Eyewitnesses on the ferries describing the distraught passengers.
Everyone was on the boat, and they were screaming. So the ferry stopped, and they threw out life vests, and then we pulled them up one by one.
The boat chartered by family and friends. Tonight, 8 people in stable condition. The driver and 1 other in critical condition. This river, the same that Captain Sully Sullenberger landed on in 2009. During tonight's briefing, New York City's Mayor Eric Adams remembering the miracle on the Hudson and thanking those who aided in this rescue.
It's unfortunate that miracle has been shattered with the loss of 2 lives. But between New York Waterway, Harbor, FDNY, and those who participated, we clearly saved lives.
Our thanks to Ariel. Still to come, the Olympic champion and his deeply personal revelation. And my conversation with a writer on Jane the Virgin about his new memoir and the revelation that turned his world around. This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive
Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5. Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7 straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live. Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
Welcome back. We're tracking several headlines around the world. A U.S. military drone strike in northwest Syria has killed the top ISIS leader there. The drone strikes is the latest in a series of operations targeting terrorist leaders who have found refuge in a region of the country controlled by rebel forces affiliated with Islamic extremist groups. Multiple Olympic and world champion Mo Farah was brought to Britain from Djibouti at the age of 9 and was forced to do housework and childcare in exchange for food, according to the BBC. The 39-year-old, who was born in Somalia, said that his name had been changed in the fake travel documents used to fly him to Britain by a woman that he had never met before. Farah's mother told the BBC that she reconnected with her son after 10 years and, quote, felt like throwing a phone on the floor and being transported to him from all the joy I felt. The Associated Press is reporting the president of Sri Lanka fled the country days after protesters stormed his home and office and the official residence of his prime minister amid a 3-month economic crisis that triggered severe shortages of food and fuel. The president, along with his wife and 2 bodyguards, left aboard a flight to the Maldives, according to an immigration official. For years, humiliation, trauma, and struggle marked the beginning of one immigrant's journey. Joining us now is someone who is all too familiar with the exploration of belonging. Known for his work on the popular show Jane the Virgin, TV writer Rafael Agustin details his revelations of being undocumented and the difficulties of being an immigrant in his latest book, Illegally Yours, a memoir. Rafael, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So I think it was your mom who said that dreams shouldn't have borders,
Yeah,
right?
she did.
And so talk to us about the harsh realities for many who are trying to achieve the American dream, really for all of us, but in particular for immigrants.
Well, in my parents' case in particular, I feel like they have the right to dream themselves, obviously. That's why we came here. They were doctors in Ecuador, South America. My dad, a pediatric surgeon, my mother, an anesthesiologist, who came here to work at a car wash and at a Kmart respectfully. And like so many immigrants before them, I think they realized that the American dream is not for them, but for their children. And then when my mom told me that dreams should not have borders is essentially the reasoning why she didn't tell me that we were undocumented. I was able to grow up an oblivious, happy, all-American, dumb kid because I didn't know the truth of our legality. My mom tried to shelter that from me.
So ignorance is bliss in many cases, but then you had that harsh awakening when you're 16, going to get your driver's license like any other teenager, and then what happens?
Well, all of my friends are driving, so I wanted to drive too, and all of my friends are planning to go to college, so I wanted to apply too, and then I'm starting to get letters from universities that say, you're our perfect candidate, can you please send us your real social security number? And I was like, Mom, Dad, what does this mean? Then I went to the DMV without telling them to get my driver's permit, and then I was like, can you please sign this? And they're like, please sit down, we have to talk to you. And that's how I discovered the truth.
And you have this chapter where you talk about how to disappoint your immigrant parents without even trying, and this conversation that you have with your dad about wanting to go into theater, right? And I want to quote you here. You say, I felt guilty because they had sacrificed so much for my sake, and still I chose the most unstable path. Talk to us about those unspoken, and I'm sure in many cases spoken pressures of being the child of an immigrant, the expectations that go along with that, and then why you decided, so you were knowing that you were disappointing your parents, and you still said, I got to pursue this anyway.
What I tell people is that the biggest secret of my life was not that I was undocumented, but that I wanted to work in film and TV. Because there is no way my immigrant parents were going to sign off on that, especially when you think about the sacrifice of their livelihoods, their careers, and everything for me to have a better shot, for me to get ahead and be able to take care of them when they're older. And I let it all ride in theater and the arts and the entertainment industry. It's very hard. It's very hard for them because it's an industry that not many people understand.
Let's talk about also 2021, you become CEO of the Latino Film Institute, right? And there's always been a cry really for more representation, diversity when it comes to being on screen, off screen, in particular for Latinos. Give us a status check. Do you feel like there's improvement? It's far too little improvement? Where are we? Too incremental?
It's too little. I mean, we're trying to get back to the 50s when Americans were comfortable to seeing a Latino in their homes every day with Lucille Ball, with Desi Arnaz. I mean, that's when we had the most representation. And now we're just trying to get back to that. I think in Hollywood, there's something called symbolic annihilation. And that's when marginalized communities, when our stories aren't being told. So we don't see ourselves in film and TV, and we don't see ourselves as part of the fabric of this country. And that's very problematic because at best, it's someone like me who grows up not seeing themselves represented and not feeling like you're part of this country. And at worst, you have someone like the mass shooter of El Paso who killed innocent Americans because he thought they were illegals or they were invaders.
How do you feel now? Do you feel like you've achieved the American dream?
I think there's a long way to go, but I will say as an immigrant kid and as someone who was formerly undocumented, the ability to buy your mom her first home was everything for me.
I can imagine. What did you hope that the readers will take away from this book?
I truly hope that people see that immigrants, and especially undocumented immigrants, we love this country so much, but we have an abusive relationship with it, like because it won't love us back. And at the very least, I hope they see that we come to this country and we make our economy stronger, we make our workforce younger, and you can't deny that we make our food taste better.
But we thank you so much for your time. Book is available right now. You can see Illegally Yours on bookshelves at a bookstore, anywhere, a memoir. Raphael Augustine, we thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And still to come, our glimpse into the past and a giant leap into the future.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Ready for a little GMA-ish promo? Okay, here we go. GMA 7A every day with Robin, George, and Michael. That's how you start the day. Boom!
Finally tonight, that awe-inspiring look deep into the cosmos. Tonight, the world is marveling at the first images from NASA's Webb telescope. Gio Benitez shows us the stunning pictures and what they might mean for the future of science and beyond.
Tonight, the splendor and breadth of the universe is on display like never before. NASA releasing the first astounding images from its new James Webb Space Telescope. This is the clearest, the deepest, and the oldest look humanity has ever had at the cosmos.
We're going back almost to the beginning. That is the discovery that we are making with this.
The stunning images captured could help jump the search for life in our universe into hyperspeed. This is the largest, most complex space telescope ever constructed. Equipped with the largest mirror ever to be flown in space, it's more than 6 times the size of the mirror aboard the Hubble telescope, snapping breathtaking images of the heavens.
The astounding detail that you can see in some of these galaxies, they just pop out. There's just so much more detail.
Including this beauty, the Carina Nebula, a stellar nursery some 7,600 light years away, Webb giving us a much crisper picture than Hubble, hidden baby stars in those cosmic cliffs now revealed to humans for the first time, according to NASA.
This telescope embodies how America leads the world, not by the example of our power, but the power of our example.
Cutting-edge infrared instruments and cameras operate in super cold temperatures colder than the surface of Pluto. A giant heat shield that blocks the sun's rays makes this possible. The telescope, an exploration powerhouse. NASA says it will change humanity's understanding of the universe and our place in it.
And you can do things we couldn't imagine of just last week.
Several times in the last 6 months, I nearly break my jaw of what I saw.
It may be hard to comprehend, but you are looking at a small snapshot of our universe from 13 billion years ago. The telescope able to look back to nearly the dawn of time and explore the first galaxies that formed after the Big Bang.
If you try and do this with Hubble, it's just not sensitive enough. If you try and do it from the ground, you can't get out to that distance or the dust is in the way. It's going to be hugely powerful.
It can also peer into atmospheres of planets, orbiting stars light years away, searching for chemical signatures of life. These first pictures, decades in the making, initial designs for the telescope began way back in 1996. A major redesign in 2005 led to the current approach, with construction completing in 2016, finally launching 6 months ago.
The people who designed this gizmo solve problems that have never been solved before.
So many starstruck with what they have seen and with what discoveries might be next for this technological marvel.
Just getting started. This is the proof that it works, and that when we take these kinds of data, it goes really deep.
Our thanks to Gio for that and the implications that will come. That is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.
America's #1 news source. America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
He thought he was God.
He's now one of the most vilified men in the world. He is the everyman. Zelensky is the Tom Hanks of Ukraine.
The fact that a little nice Jewish boy is 5'7" is showing up this KGB agent in the Kremlin.
What do you say to Americans who see Russia and you not only as a rival, but an unfriendly adversary?
Two men at war.
Which Vladimir will take over. The world is not going to be the same.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Tonight, breaking news in New York City, the deadly accident on the Hudson, the boat sinking, a child among the dead. Also, the chilling images just made public tonight from inside the Uvalde school, what those images reveal. And the explosive claim late today at the January 6 hearing, the bombshell allegation in front of the American people against former President Trump. Congresswoman Liz Cheney suggesting the former president allegedly reached out to a witness that the American people have not heard from yet. She said the committee reporting it to the Department of Justice. And tonight here, for the first time, the American people hearing testimony from former Trump White House counsel Pat Cipollone, describing an unhinged meeting inside the White House. The extreme ideas proposed for Trump to hold on to power, a plan for the U.S. military to seize voting machines. Also, the committee today accusing Trump of summoning the mob with his own words to Washington. And writer Stephen Ayers testifying that he was answering Donald Trump's call. And the emotional moment in that hearing room today involving the rioter and the Capitol officers. Rachel Scott and Pierre Thomas standing by. Also tonight, those images coming in now, that deadly boating accident on the Hudson, a boat capsizing. At least 2 people dead, including the child, several victims pulled from the water. Ariel Resha from the scene tonight. Also late today as parents demand answers in Texas, that newly obtained surveillance showing the gunman in Uvalde, armed with a rifle in the halls of Robb Elementary. A boy rounding the corner seconds after he passes by. Officers begin filling the hallway 3 minutes later, several coming under fire, and how long it takes before they go after the gunman. Maria Villarreal in Texas. The warning tonight about this new COVID variant now sweeping the country, what authorities want you to know. And the remarkable images tonight of the universe, the James Webb Space Telescope giving us a new view tonight, and we'll take you right through them.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Tuesday night. We're on the scene of that deadly accident on the Hudson River here in New York City. A child among the dead tonight, a boat capsizing, the rescue effort underway. And the images also just released today inside that Uvalde school as parents there demand answers. What the images now reveal of the gunman, the police, and it's chilling. But we do begin tonight with the explosive testimony and the claims late today from the January 6th committee. Tonight, for the first time, we hear from White House counsel Pat Cipollone from the Trump administration on an unhinged meeting, as he described it, inside the White House. The extreme efforts considered to keep former President Trump in office. The committee trying to make the case today that Trump's words summoned the mob to Washington and then sent them to the Capitol. And at the end, Vice Chair Congresswoman Liz Cheney saying the former president tried to reach out to a witness that the American people have not heard from yet. She said they've reported it to the Department of Justice. Today's testimony detailing the president's words, the efforts to draw those crowds to Washington, and the president's tweet immediately after that meeting described as unhinged, calling supporters to Washington on January 6, saying, "Be there, it will be wild." For the first time, that testimony from former White House counsel Pat Cipollone, among the ideas he said that were being discussed in that meeting, the military seizing voting machines across this country. Testifying today, a former spokesperson for the Oath Keepers, Jason Van Tatenhove, who said that day could have been a spark for a civil war, and his warning about the next election. Also, Steve Ayers, the Ohio man who was there at the Capitol that day, he said following Trump's words, he's been charged. He said he believed the president's claim of a stolen election, and he also believed that it would be overturned that day. But in looking back, he now urges Americans to take the blinders off. And that emotional moment right after the hearing today. Rachel Scott leading us off from the Capitol again tonight.
Today, the January 6th committee methodically laying out how President Trump summoned an armed mob to Washington, D.C., ignoring his top White House advisors who told him he had lost the election. We're coming for you! One of the loudest voices, his White House counsel, Pat Cipollone.
There's no evidence of election fraud sufficient to undermine the outcome in any particular state.
Yes, I agree with that.
Trump's attorney general agreed. His daughter Ivanka, top cabinet secretaries. The president ignored them all.
President Trump is a 76-year-old man. He is not an impressionable child. And Donald Trump cannot escape responsibility by being willfully blind.
Instead, Trump turned to outside advisors like lawyer Sidney Powell, who embraced conspiracy theories and suggested seizing voting machines, all without providing any proof of election fraud.
At some point, you have to put up or shut up. That was my view.
Why was this, on a broader scale, a bad idea for the country?
To have the federal government seize voting machines, it's a terrible idea for the country. That's not how we do things in the United States.
The clash between Trump's outside advisors and his White House team coming to a head on December 18th at an explosive meeting in the White House.
I opened the door and I walked in. I saw General Flynn. I saw Sidney Powell sitting there. I was not happy to see the people in the Oval Office.
And at one point, General Flynn took out a diagram that supposedly showed IP addresses all over the world, and who was communicating with whom via the machines, and some comment about like Nest thermostats being hooked up to the internet.
The White House team arguing with lawyer Sidney Powell, who wanted to seize voting machines.
Cipollone and Hirschman and whoever the other guy was showed nothing but contempt and disdain of the president.
And we were asking one simple question as a general matter. Where is the evidence?
And she says, well, the judges are corrupt. And I was like, everyone? Every single case that you've done in the country you guys lost, every one of them is corrupt, even the ones we appointed?
Trump's advisors nearly coming to blows. The president taking it all in. And when the meeting broke up well after midnight, he fired off this tweet, calling his supporters to Washington on January 6th, telling them, be there, will be wild. The committee says for the right-wing fringe, that one tweet was an instant call to action.
And now Donald Trump is calling on his supporters to descend on Washington, D.C., January 6th.
He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and to show our numbers.
If necessary, storming right into the Capitol.
January 6th, there's going to be 1 million plus geeked up armed Americans.
The time for action is now. Where were you when history called?
One user asked, is the 6th D-Day? Is that why Trump wants everyone there?
Today, the American people hearing one Trump supporter, Stephen Ayers of Ohio, who testified he answered the president's call.
Why'd you decide to march to the Capitol?
Well, basically, the president, got everybody riled up, told everybody to head on down. So we basically were just following what he said.
As you started marching, did you think there was still a chance the election would be overturned?
Yeah, at that time I did, because everybody was kind of like in the hope that, Vice President Pence was not going to certify the election. Also the whole time on our way down there, I kept hearing about this big reveal I remember us talking about, and we kind of thought maybe that was it. So that hope was there.
Ayers is one of those who stormed the Capitol. He just pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct.
Basically, I lost my job, pretty much sold my house. It changed my life. and not for the good, definitely not for the, for the better.
In the front row watching Ayers testify, another man whose life was changed that day, Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Ganell.
Last month, on June 28th, Sergeant Ganell's team of doctors told him that permanent injuries he has suffered to his left shoulder and right foot now make it impossible for him to continue as a police officer. He must leave policing for good and figure out the rest of his life.
As lawmakers spoke of his patriotism and sacrifice, Sergeant Ganell quietly wiping away tears. Today's hearing concluding with this warning from Congresswoman Liz Cheney.
After our last hearing, President Trump tried to call a witness in our investigation, a witness you have not yet seen in these hearings. That person declined to answer or respond to President Trump's call and instead alerted their lawyer to the call. Their lawyer alerted us, and this committee has supplied that information to the Department of Justice. Let me say one more time, we will take any effort to influence witness testimony very seriously.
We're going to get reaction to that from the Justice Department in just a moment, our new reporting. But in the meantime, let's get right to Rachel Scott tonight, live at the Capitol. Rachel, you and I were on the air together this afternoon as that remarkable moment played out late today after the hearing. Stephen Ayers, the Ohio man who described himself as a family man who worked for a cabinet maker, who then wound up storming the Capitol, he said, for Trump. He said, looking back, it's like he had blinders on. Well, today, look at this moment right here. He approached the officers, including Sergeant Ganell, apologizing for what he had done.
Yes, David, and tonight Sergeant Ganell tells me that he does accept that apology from Stephen Ayers, but he believes he does need to be held accountable for his actions, David.
And Rachel, I want to go back to another key moment today. Lawmakers obtaining text messages from former President Trump's former campaign manager, Brad Parscale. Parscale texting a colleague after the scene unfolded on January 6th, saying, quote, a sitting president asking for a civil war, adding, I feel guilty for helping him win. He texted, a woman is dead. If I was Trump and knew my rhetoric killed someone. Remarkable text messages revealed by that committee.
Yes, David, and this is striking because this is someone who has worked closely with the former president since his very first campaign. In fact, he is still working for Donald Trump. And today, another revelation in this hearing, the committee obtaining a draft tweet from Trump just 2 days before the insurrection, actually calling on his supporters to march to the Capitol on January 6th. That tweet was never sent out, but lawmakers say it underscores that this was Trump's goal all along, David.
All right, Rachel, our thanks to you. And you heard Rachel report there that explosive allegation from Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who claimed former President Trump reached out to a witness who the country has not seen testify yet. That witness not taking the call, alerting their lawyer. Tonight, Cheney saying the committee has now reported this to the Department of Justice. So let's bring in our Chief Justice Correspondent, Pierre Thomas, with late reporting. And the Justice Department is now reviewing this, Pierre.
David, that contact apparently happened right after the last hearing, and Vice Chair Cheney is firing a warning shot, telling former President Trump to stop reaching out to witnesses. According to committee member Jamie Raskin, quote, this has been an ongoing pattern, and we're trying to send a message that witness tampering is a crime. But before DOJ would take any action, it would need to know a great deal more. For example, did President Trump know this person had been called to be a witness, and exactly what was the context of that call? DOJ is not commenting, but today Congress was clearly trying to turn up the heat on former President Trump, David.
All right, Pierre Thomas, Rachel Scott, our thanks to you both tonight. We move on to the other news, and late today, an awful scene unfolding on the Hudson River right here in New York City. A boat on the Hudson capsizing, a child among the dead tonight. The rescue effort to get to several others. Victims pulled from the water. ABC's Ariel Reshef on the scene tonight.
Tonight, tragedy on New York City's Hudson River. 2 people dead after this small jet boat capsized. The victims, a 7-year-old boy and a 50-year-old woman. Authorities and New York Waterway Ferries frantically attempt to pull 12 people from the water. First responders rendering first aid.
We saw a couple people on the water, and they just kept popping out. It was a capsized boat.
Eyewitnesses on the ferries describing the distraught passengers.
Everyone was on the boat, and they were screaming. So the ferry stopped, and they threw out life vests and then we pulled them up one by one.
The boat chartered by family and friends. Tonight, 8 people in stable condition. The driver and 1 other in critical condition. This river, the same that Captain Sully Sullenberger landed on in 2009. During tonight's briefing, New York City's Mayor Eric Adams remembering the miracle on the Hudson and thanking those who aided in this rescue.
It's unfortunate that miracle has been shattered with the loss of 2 lives. But between New York Waterway, Harbor, FDNY, and those who participated, we clearly saved lives.
And David, tonight the investigation is just beginning. Authorities looking into the condition of the water and the capacity of that jet boat to see if there may have been too many people on board. David?
All right, Ariel Reshef here in New York. Ariel, thank you. Now to Texas, where parents have been demanding answers in Uvalde, and tonight newly released surveillance from inside Robb Elementary, and it's chilling. Some of the families of the victims have been demanding to see this video. It was obtained by our Austin affiliate KVUE and the Austin American-Statesman newspaper, who are sharing it to provide transparency to those families and to the community. ABC's Maria Villarreal with the disturbing new images tonight that show the gunmen in the school hallways, the police, and how long it took to get to those children.
Tonight, chilling video from the rampage at Robb Elementary. Surveillance footage obtained by KVUE and the Austin American-Statesman, capturing the moment the gunman crashed his truck near the school, opening fire on 2 witnesses who had raced to the scene to help. Moments later, a teacher frantically calling 911. Outside the school, you can hear the shooter firing at the building. At 11:33, a witness capturing the gunman entering the school with a rifle. Inside, he calmly makes his way down the hall. A little boy rounding the corner as the gunman opens fire, narrowly escaping as more than 100 rounds are fired. 3 minutes later, police arriving. 2 officers doubling back as they come under fire. 19 minutes after the gunman first opened fire inside, more heavily armed officers arrive, some with shields. 36 minutes in, officers are still seen standing in the hallway, guns drawn, but still have not confronted the suspect. 48 minutes go by. He fires another 4 rounds, but still no rescue attempts. At 57 minutes later, more waiting. It's not until 12:50, 77 minutes after the shooter entered the school, 74 minutes after the first police arrive, that a team would finally breach the classroom and kill the gunman.
This afternoon, I reached out to several families. One mother says that she does not plan to watch this video because it will not bring her daughter back. Another family says they were able to watch about 20 seconds but couldn't stomach much more after seeing the gunman inside that hallway. And I just got off the phone with the mayor a few minutes ago, David. He tells me right now this is a disrespectful way to release this video, that these families have been blindsided, and he plans to ask for a full investigation of how it was leaked. David?
Yeah, it's impossible to imagine what it's like for these families to see this, Maria, but you can't understand how they're demanding answers, and we'll stay on this as you have been. Thank you, Maria. In the meantime, to the pandemic tonight and a growing number of COVID cases, 65% of new cases, in fact, now linked to that newest subvariant, BA.5. Tonight, authorities say it's more transmissible and also better at evading immunity. Hospital admissions have doubled since early May. Tonight, the White House urging Americans to stay up to date on their COVID shots and boosters, and in high-risk areas to mask up indoors again, and in medium-risk areas to mask up based on your individual risk. We turn now to the war in Ukraine tonight. The U.S. announcing a major new infusion of cash to Ukraine, $1.7 billion, and it comes amid these warnings that Iran is about to offer significant help to Russia in fighting the Ukrainians. Our foreign correspondent James Longman reporting in from Ukraine tonight.
A huge new tranche of aid is being provided by the U.S., David. $1.7 billion to help maintain Ukraine's essential services like healthcare. And just as President Biden prepares for his trip to the Middle East, Vladimir Putin is heading to Tehran next week for talks with both the Iranian and Turkish leaders. Now, the talks will be focused on Syria, but Ukraine will be front and center, especially now that the United States has said that Tehran is planning on sending hundreds of combat drones to Moscow for help in its war here in Ukraine. As foreign help for both sides builds, it's clear just how global the consequences of this war have become. David.
All right, James Longman reporting in from Kyiv. James, thank you. When we come back tonight, news coming in this evening about the ISIS leader killed in a U.S. drone strike. And then later here, stay tuned, the new images tonight of the universe, and they're extraordinary.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive
Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5. Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news.
He thought he was God.
He's now one of the most vilified men in the world. He is the everyman. Zelensky is the Tom Hanks of Ukraine.
The fact that a little nice Jewish boy is 5'7" is showing up this KGB agent in the Kremlin.
What do you say to Americans who see Russia and you not only as a rival, but an unfriendly adversary?
Two men at war.
Which Vladimir will take over. The world is not going to be the same.
So what's good to read this summer? Well, Kate and I have decided to jump in and help you.
And we're talking with Oprah, John Irving, and so many popular authors and influencers.
So we want you to join us. Myself, Charlie Gibson, and my daughter, Kate Gibson.
Oh, hey, that's me.
That is you. For the new podcast series, it is called The Bookcase with Kate and Charlie.
We will make sure you love what you read.
Listen anywhere and anytime. The Bookcase Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news.
Tonight, the U.S. is now confirming the death of a top ISIS leader in northwest Syria. The Pentagon saying the leader was killed, another senior ISIS official wounded, all in a drone strike, part of a series of operations targeting terrorist leaders in that part of Syria. When we come back here, the major airport where they're halting any new ticket sales until September because of the luggage disaster.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live. Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now. America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
National parks are incredibly safe places, but crime will happen.
My wife had fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
To the index in travel chaos at Heathrow Airport in London. Heathrow now telling airlines to stop selling any tickets through Heathrow until mid-September and setting a limit of 100,000 passengers per day. The airport's struggling with major delays, lines, and a massive backup tonight of lost baggage. When we come back here, the new and amazing look at the universe.
It was an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
In Putin's Russia.
on the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
These days, with so much going on, it's hard to keep up.
While others are recapping yesterday's headlines.
We're bringing you the right now.
This is the busy border crossing. Steel barricades, another strike.
The right now look at the day ahead, how it affects you and your family.
Record high gas prices.
The threat of cyber warfare.
Is peace possible?
World News Now beginning at 2 a.m. Eastern, followed by America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
Streaming here on ABC News Live.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms. Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions, straightforward reporting, no spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Finally tonight here, the universe as it's never been seen before. Here's Gio Benitez.
Tonight, the new James Webb Telescope reaching deeper into the universe than ever before.
Oh my gosh, it really does work. Personally, I went and had an ugly cry.
This one showing a wide angle of just a tiny fraction of the universe. Thousands of galaxies in view, the red ones going back to the dawn of time, more than 13 billion years ago. And this image, the death of a star, collapsing, then exploding, creating that gorgeous ring of colors. This image capturing 5 galaxies together, those sweeping tails of gas seen in crystal clear detail. And here, the so-called cosmic cliffs, the Carina Nebula, where stars are born.
And David, the Webb telescope has already made a discovery finding water vapor in the atmosphere of a planet that's orbiting a distant star. Just incredible, David.
Really is, Gio. Thank you. Just spectacular. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Good night. With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
Seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know,
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it? Feel smarter.
feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live. It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart that he did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
This is an ABC News special report. Attack on the Capitol, the investigation. Now reporting David Muir.
Good afternoon again, everyone, and we're coming on the air for what is expected to be a key day here in the January 6th investigation, what could be a pivotal next chapter, in fact, for the January 6th committee. The 7th hearing just moments away from starting. The committee, we are told, will be focusing today on former President Donald Trump, some in his inner circle as well, and their possible links to the extremist groups who stormed the U.S. Capitol. Of course, the question at the heart of today's hearing, will they be able to show a link, any connection between the former president and groups such as the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, many of whom were arrested for attacking the Capitol, assault police officers trying to stop Congress from certifying the election for President Biden. Some of the officers who were attacked are in the chamber today, including officers Harry Dunn and Daniel Hodges, who we have spoke with in the past here. Our team of correspondents all standing by: Jonathan Karl, Rachel Scott, Pierre Thomas, ABC News legal analyst Dan Abrams. Among them, they are all ready to dissect it all today. The panel focusing in part on Donald Trump's own words, his tweets leading up to the January 6th rally, telling supporters to be there, will be wild. That tweet coming after a key meeting inside the White House in December. The committee is expected to laser in on that meeting today, who was in that meeting, what was discussed, and then the tweet that followed that meeting, making the case that the former president was signaling those extremist groups, trying to get their attention, trying to get them to come to Washington. We're going to hear from the former spokesperson for the Oath Keepers, Jason Van Tatenhove, also a rider who traveled from Ohio and Washington. We will hear from who warned of a possible, quote, civil war. The chairman of the committee at the gaveling in right now, Chairman Thompson. Let's listen to what he has to say.
The Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during today's hearing. Good afternoon. When I think about the most basic way to explain the importance of elections in the United States, there's a phrase that always comes to mind. It may sound straightforward, but it's meaningful. We settle our differences at the ballot box. Sometimes my choice prevails, sometimes yours does, but it's that simple. We cast our votes, we count the votes. If something seems off with the results, We can challenge them in court, and then we accept the results. When you're on the losing side, that doesn't mean you have to be happy about it. And in the United States, there's plenty you can do and say so. You can protest, you can organize, you can get ready for the next election to try to make sure your side has a better chance the next time the people settle their differences at the ballot box. But you can't turn violent. You can't try to achieve your desired outcome through force or harassment or intimidation. Any real leader who sees their supporters going down that path, approaching that line, has a responsibility to say, stop. We gave it our best. We came up short. We try again next time, because we settled our differences at the ballot box. On December 14th, 2020, the presidential election was officially over. The Electoral College had cast its vote. Joe Biden was the president-elect of the United States. By that point, many of Donald Trump's supporters were already convinced that the election had been stolen, because that's what Donald Trump had been telling them. So what Donald Trump was required to do in that moment, what would have been required of any American leader, was to say, we did our best and we came up short. He went the opposite way. He seized on the anger he had already stoked among his most loyal supporters, and as they approached the line, he didn't wave them off. He urged them on. Today, the committee will explain how, as a part of his last-ditch effort to overturn the election and block the transfer of power, Donald Trump summoned a mob to Washington, D.C., and ultimately spurred that mob to wage a violent attack on our democracy. Our colleagues, Ms. Murphy of Florida and Mr. Raskin of Maryland, will lay out this story. First, I'm pleased to recognize our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, for any opening comments she'd care to offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Our committee did not conduct a hearing last week, but we did conduct an on-the-record interview of President Trump's former White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. If you've watched these hearings, you've heard us call for Mr. Cipollone to come forward to testify. He did, and Mr. Cipollone's testimony met our expectations. We will save for our next hearing President Trump's behavior during the violence of January 6th. Today's hearing will take us from December 14th, 2020, when the Electoral College met and certified the results of the 2020 presidential election, up through the morning of January 6th. You will see certain segments of Pat Cipollone's testimony today. We will also see today how President Trump summoned a mob to Washington and how the president's stolen election lies provoked that mob to attack the Capitol. And we will hear from a man who was induced by President Trump's lies to come to Washington and join the mob, and how that decision has changed his life. Today's hearing is our 7th. We have covered significant ground over the past several weeks, and we have also seen a change in how witnesses and lawyers in the Trump orbit approach this committee. Initially, their strategy in some cases appeared to be to deny and delay. Today, there appears to be a general recognition that the committee has established key facts, including that virtually everyone close to President Trump, his Justice Department officials, his White House advisors, his White House counsel, his campaign, all told him the 2020 election was not stolen. This appears to have changed the strategy for defending Donald Trump. Now the argument seems to be that President Trump was manipulated by others outside the administration, that he was persuaded to ignore his closest advisors, and that he was incapable of telling right from wrong. This new strategy is to try to blame only John Eastman or Sidney Powell or Congressman Scott Perry or others, and not President Trump. In this version, the president was, quote, poorly served by these outside advisors. The strategy is to blame people his advisors called, quote, the crazies for what Donald Trump did. This, of course, is nonsense. President Trump is a 76-year-old man. He is not an impressionable child. Just like everyone else in our country, he is responsible for his own actions and his own choices. As our investigation has shown, Donald Trump had access to more detailed and specific information showing that the election was not actually stolen than almost any other American. And he was told this over and over again. No rational or sane man in his position could disregard that information and reach the opposite conclusion. And Donald Trump cannot escape responsibility by being willfully blind. Nor can any argument of any kind excuse President Trump's behavior during the violent attack on January 6th. As you watch our hearing today, I would urge you to keep your eye on two specific points. First, you will see evidence that Trump's legal team, led by Rudy Giuliani, knew that they lacked actual evidence of widespread fraud sufficient to prove that the election was actually stolen. They knew it, but they went ahead with January 6th anyway. And second, consider how millions of Americans were persuaded to believe what Donald Trump's closest advisors in his administration did not. These Americans did not have access to the truth like Donald Trump did. They put their faith and their trust in Donald Trump. They wanted to believe in him. They wanted to fight for their country, and he deceived them. For millions of Americans, that may be painful to accept, but it is true. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Murphy, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, for opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that then President Donald Trump lost in a free and fair election. And yet, President Trump insisted that his loss was due to fraud in the election process, rather than to the democratic will of the voters. The president continued to make this claim despite being told again and again by the courts, by the Justice Department, by his campaign officials, and by some of his closest advisors that the evidence did not support this assertion. This was the big lie, and millions of Americans were deceived by it. Too many of our fellow citizens still believe it to this day. It's corrosive to our country and damaging to our democracy. As our committee has shown in prior hearings, following the election, President Trump relentlessly pursued multiple interlocking lines of effort, all with a single goal: to remain in power despite having lost. The lines of effort were aimed at his loyal Vice President, Mike Pence, at state election and elected officials, and at the U.S. Department of Justice. The president pressured the vice president to obstruct the process to certify the election result. He demanded that state officials find him enough votes to overturn the election outcome in that state, and he pressed the Department of Justice to find widespread evidence of fraud. When justice officials told the president that such evidence did not exist, the president urged them to simply declare that the election was corrupt. On December 14th, the Electoral College met to officially confirm that Joe Biden would be the next president. The evidence shows that once this occurred, President Trump and those who were willing to aid and abet him turned their attention to the joint session of Congress scheduled for January 6th, at which the vice president would preside. In their warped view, this ceremonial event was the next, and perhaps the last, inflection point that could be used to reverse the outcome of the election before Mr. Biden's inauguration. As President Trump put it, the vice president and enough members of Congress simply needed to summon the courage to act. To help them find that courage, the president called for backup. Early in the morning of December 19th, the president sent out a tweet urging his followers to travel to Washington, D.C. for January 6th. "Be there, we'll be wild," the president wrote. As my colleague, Mr. Raskin, will describe in detail, this tweet served as a call to action, and in some cases as a call to arms for many of President Trump's most loyal supporters. It's clear the president intended the assembled crowd on the January 6th to serve his goal. And as you've already seen, and as you will see again today, some of those who were coming had specific plans. The president's goal was to stay in power for a second term despite losing the election. The assembled crowd was one of the tools to achieve that goal. And in today's hearing, we will focus on events that took place in the final weeks leading up to January 6th, starting in mid-December. And we'll add color and context to evidence you've already heard about, and we'll also provide additional new evidence. For example, you'll hear about meetings in which the president entertained extreme measures designed to help him stay in power, like the seizure of voting machines. We will show some of the coordination that occurred between the White House and members of Congress as it relates to January 6th. And some of these members of Congress would later seek pardons. We will also examine some of the planning for the January 6th protests, placing special emphasis on one rally planner's concerns about the potential violence. And we will describe some of the president's key actions on the evening of January 5th and the morning of January 6th, including how the president edited and ad-libbed his speech that morning at the Ellipse, directed the crowd to march to the Capitol, and spoke off script in a way that further inflamed an already angry crowd. I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair. 4 days after the electors met across the country and made Joe Biden the president-elect, Donald Trump was still trying to find a way to hang on to the presidency. On Friday, December 18th, his team of outside advisors paid him a surprise visit in the White House that would quickly become the stuff of legend. The meeting has been called unhinged, not normal, and the craziest meeting of the Trump presidency. The outside lawyers who'd been involved in dozens of failed lawsuits had lots of theories supporting the big lie, but no evidence to support it. As we will see, however, they brought to the White House a draft executive order that they had prepared for President Trump to further his ends. Specifically, they proposed the immediate mass seizure of state election machines by the U.S. military. The meeting ended after midnight with apparent rejection of that idea. In the wee hours of December 19th, dissatisfied with his options, Donald Trump decided to call for a large and wild crowd on Wednesday, January 6th, the day when Congress would meet to certify the electoral votes. Never before in American history had a president called for a crowd to come contest the counting of electoral votes by Congress, or engaged in any effort designed to influence, delay, or obstruct the joint session of Congress in doing its work required by our Constitution and the Electoral Count Act. As we'll see, Donald Trump's 1:42 a.m. tweet electrified and galvanized his supporters, especially the dangerous extremists in the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and other racist and white nationalist groups spoiling for a fight against the government. 3 rings of interwoven attack were now operating towards January 6th. On the inside ring, Trump continued trying to work to overturn the election by getting Mike Pence to abandon his oath of office as vice president and assert the unilateral power to reject electoral votes. This would have been a fundamental and unprecedented breach of the Constitution that would promise Trump multiple ways of staying in office. Meanwhile, in the middle ring, members of domestic violent extremist groups created an alliance, both online and in person, to coordinate a massive effort to storm, invade, and occupy the Capitol. By placing a target on the joint session of Congress, Trump had mobilized these groups around a common goal, emboldening them, strengthening their working relationships, and helping build their numbers. Finally, in the outer ring, on January 6th, there assembled a large and angry crowd, the political force that Trump considered both the touchstone and the measure of his political power. Here were thousands of enraged Trump followers, thoroughly convinced by the big lie, who traveled from across the country to join Trump's wild rally to stop the steal. With the proper incitement by political leaders and the proper instigation from the extremists, many members of this crowd could be led to storm the Capitol, confront the vice president in Congress, and try to overturn the 2020 election result. All of these efforts would converge and explode on January the 6th. Mr. Chairman, as you know better than any other member of this committee from the wrenching struggle for voting rights in your beloved Mississippi, the problem of politicians whipping up mob violence to destroy fair elections is the oldest domestic enemy of constitutional democracy in America. Abraham Lincoln knew it too. In 1837, a racist mob in Alton, Illinois, broke into the offices of an abolitionist newspaper and killed its editor, Elijah Lovejoy. Lincoln wrote a speech in which he said that no transatlantic military giant could ever crush us as a nation, even with all of the fortunes in the world. But if downfall ever comes to America, he said, we ourselves would be its author and finisher. If racist mobs are encouraged by politicians to rampage and terrorize, Lincoln said, they will violate the rights of other citizens and quickly destroy the bonds of social trust necessary for democracy to work. Mobs and demagogues will put us on a path to political tyranny, Lincoln said. As we'll see today, this very old problem has returned with new ferocity today as a president who lost an election deployed a mob which included dangerous extremists to attack the constitutional system of election and the peaceful transfer of power. And as we'll see, the creation of the internet and social media has given today's tyrants tools of propaganda and disinformation that yesterday's despots could only have dreamed of. I yield back to the gentle lady from Florida, Ms. Murphy.
Article 2 of the United States Constitution establishes the Electoral College. Each state's laws provide that electors are to be chosen by a popular vote. And on December 14th, 2020, electors met in all 50 states and the District of Columbia to cast their votes. Joseph Biden won by a margin of 306 to 232. The election was over. Mr. Biden was the president-elect. Before the Electoral College met, Donald Trump and his allies filed dozens of legal challenges to the election, but they lost over and over again, including in front of multiple judges President Trump had nominated to the bench. In many of these cases, the judges were highly critical of the arguments put forward, explaining that no genuine evidence of widespread fraud had been presented. For example, a federal judge in Pennsylvania said, "This court has been presented with strained legal arguments without merit and speculative accusations unsupported by evidence. In the United States of America, this cannot justify the disenfranchisement of a single voter, let alone all the voters of its sixth most populated state." On December 15th, after the Electoral College certified the outcome, the Republican majority leader in the Senate acknowledged Mr. Biden's victory.
Yesterday, electors met in all 50 states. So as of this morning, our country has officially a president-elect and a vice president-elect. Many millions of us had hoped the presidential election would yield a different result. But our system of government has processes to determine who will be sworn in on January the 20th. The Electoral College has spoken. So today I want to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden.
Even members of President Trump's cabinet and his White House staff understood the significance of his losses in the courts and the absence of evidence of fraud. They also respected the constitutional certification by the Electoral College. Many of them told President Trump that it was time to concede the election to Mr. Biden. For example, then Secretary of Labor Gene Scalia, an accomplished lawyer and the son of late Justice Scalia, called President Trump in mid-December and advised him to concede and accept the rulings of the courts.
And so I had to put a call into the president. I might have called on the 13th. We spoke, I believe, on the 14th, in which I conveyed to him that I thought that it was time for him to acknowledge that President Biden had prevailed in the election. But I communicated to the president that when that legal process is exhausted and when the electors have voted, that's the point at which that outcome needs to be expected. I told him that I did believe, yes, that once those legal processes were run, if fraud had not been established that had affected the outcome of the election, then unfortunately I believed that what had to be done was concede the outcome.
As you've seen in prior hearings, President Trump's Justice Department, his White House staff, and his campaign officials were repeatedly telling him that there was no evidence of fraud sufficient to change the outcome of the election. And last week, we conducted an 8-hour interview with President Trump's White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. You will see a number of excerpts of that interview today and even more in our next hearing. Mr. Cipollone told us that he agreed with the testimony that there was no evidence of fraud sufficient to overturn the election.
I want to start by asking if you agree, Mr. Cipollone, with the conclusions of Matt Morgan, Bill Barr, of all of the individuals who evaluated those claims, that there is no evidence of election fraud sufficient to undermine the outcome in a particular state.
Yes, I agree with that.
And Mr. Cipollone also specifically testified that he believed that Donald Trump should have conceded the election.
Did you believe, Mr. Cipollone, that the president should concede once you made the determination based on the investigations that you credited DOJ did? Did you, in your mind, form the belief that the president should concede the election loss at a certain point after the election?
Well, again, I was the White House counsel. Some of those decisions are political. So to the extent that, but if your question is that I believe he should concede the election at a point in time, yes, I did. I believe Leader McConnell went onto the floor of the Senate, I believe in mid-December, and basically said, the process is done. That would be in line with my thinking on these things.
As Attorney General Bill Barr testified, December 14th should have been the end of the matter.
December 14th was the day that the states certified their votes and sent them to Congress. And in my view, that was the end of the matter. I didn't see, I thought that this would lead inexorably to a new administration.
Mr. Cipollone also testified that the president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, said he shared this view.
Yeah. As early as that November 23rd meeting, we understand that there was discussion about the president possibly conceding the election. And specifically, we understand that Mark Meadows assured both you and Attorney General Barr that the president would eventually agree to a graceful exit. Do you remember Mr. Meadows making any such representation?
Are you saying as part of that meeting or separately? Again, without getting into that meeting, I would say that is a statement and a sentiment that I heard from Mark Meadows.
I see. And again, do you know if it was on November 23rd or some point?
Again, it was probably, around that time, and it was probably subsequent to that time. It wasn't a one-time statement.
Mr. Meadows has refused to testify, and the committee is in litigation with him. But many other White House officials shared the view that once the litigation ended and the Electoral College met, the election was over. And here's President Trump's former press secretary.
I wanted to clarify, Ms. McEnany, so back to my previous question, it was your view then, or was it your view that the efforts to overturn the election should have stopped once the litigation was complete?
In my view, upon the conclusion of litigation was when I began to plan for life after the administration.
And this is what Ivanka Trump told us.
December 14th was the day on which the Electoral College met, when these electors around the country met and cast the electoral votes consistent with the popular vote in each state. And it was obviously a public proceeding or a series of proceedings that President Biden had obtained the requisite number of electors. Was that an important day for you? Did that affect sort of your planning or your realization as to whether or not there was going to be an end of this administration?
I think so. I think it was my sentiment probably prior as well.
Judd Deere was a White House deputy press secretary. This was his testimony about what he told President Trump.
I told him that my personal viewpoint was that the Electoral College had met, which is the system that our country is set under to elect a president and vice president. And I believed at that point that the means for him to pursue litigation was probably closed.
And you recall what his response, if any, was?
He disagreed.
We've also seen this testimony from Attorney General Barr reflecting a view of the White House staff in late November 2020.
And then at that point, I left. And as I walked out of the Oval Office, Jared was there with Dan Scavino, who ran the president's social media, and who I thought was a reasonable guy and believe is a reasonable guy. And I said, how long is he going to carry on with this stolen election stuff? Where's this going to go? And by that time, Meadows had caught up with me and leaving the office and caught up to me and said that he said, look, I think that he's becoming more realistic and knows that there's a limit to how far he can take this. And then Jared said, yeah, we're working on this. We're working on it.
Likewise, in this testimony, Cassidy Hutchinson, an aide to Mark Meadows, described her conversations with President Trump's Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, a former Republican congressman.
He had expressed to me that he was concerned that it could spiral out of control and potentially be dangerous, either for our democracy or the way that things were going for the 6th.
Of course, underlying all of this is the fundamental principle that the President of the United States cannot simply disregard the rulings of state and federal courts, which are empowered to address specific election-related claims. The President cannot simply pretend that the courts had not ruled.
By that time, the President or his associates had lost 60 out of 61 cases that they had brought to challenge different aspects of the election in a number of states. They lost 60 out of 61 of those cases. So by the time we get to January 3rd, that's been clear. I assume, Pat, that you would agree the president is obligated to abide by the rulings of the courts.
Of course.
And I assume you also
everybody is obligated to abide by rules of the courts.
And I assume you also would agree the president has a particular obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
That is one of the president's obligations, correct.
Yet President Trump disregarded these court rulings and the counsel from his closest advisors and continued his efforts to cling to power. In our prior hearings, you have heard considerable testimony about President Trump's attempts to corruptly pressure Vice President Pence to refuse to count electoral votes, to corrupt the Department of Justice, to pressure state officials and state legislatures, and to create and submit a series of fake electoral slates. Now, we will show you what other actions President Trump was taking between December 14th, 2020 and January 6th. I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Throughout our hearings, you've heard how President Trump made baseless claims that voting machines were being manipulated by foreign powers in the 2020 election. You've also heard Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr, describe such claims as complete nonsense, which he told the president. Let's review that testimony.
I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public, that there was this systemic corruption in the system and that their votes didn't count and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense. and it was being laid out there. And I told them that it was crazy stuff, and they were wasting their time on that. And it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
We've learned that President Trump's White House counsel agreed with the Department of Justice about this.
Attorney General Barr made a public announcement on December 1st, less than a month, that he had seen knows has been fraud sufficient. Fair to say that by December 1st, you had reached the same conclusion?
It's fair to say that I agree with Attorney General Barr's conclusion on December 1st. Yes, I did, and I supported that conclusion.
However, the strong rejection of the Attorney General and the White House counsel of these claims did not stop the president from trying to press them in public. But that's not all he did. Indeed, as you'll see in this clip, the president asked Attorney General Bill Barr to have the Department of Justice seize voting machines in the states.
My recollection is the president said something like, well, we could get to the bottom. Some people say we could get to the bottom of this if the department seized the machines. It was a typical way of raising a point. And I said, absolutely not. There's no probable cause, and we're not going to seize any machines. And that was that. Yeah.
But this wasn't the end of the matter. On the evening of December 18th, 2020, Sidney Powell, General Michael Flynn, and others entered the White House for an unplanned meeting with the president, the meeting that would last multiple hours and become hot-blooded and contentious. The executive order behind me on the screen was drafted on December the 16th, just 2 days after the Electoral College vote, by several of the president's outside advisors over a luncheon at the Trump International Hotel. As you can see here, this proposed order directs the Secretary of Defense to seize voting machines, quote, effective immediately, but it goes even further than that. Under the order, President Trump would appoint a special counsel with the power to seize machines and then charge people with crimes with all resources necessary to carry out her duties. The specific plan was to name Sidney Powell as special counsel, the Trump lawyer who had spent the post-election period making outlandish claims about Venezuelan and Chinese interference in the election, among others. Here's what White House counsel Pat Cipollone had to say about Sidney Powell's qualifications to take on such expansive authority.
I don't think Sidney Powell would say that I thought it was a good idea to appoint her special counsel. I was vehemently opposed. I didn't think she should be appointed to anything.
Sidney Powell told the president that these steps were justified because of her evidence of foreign interference in the 2020 election. However, as we've seen, Trump's allies had no such evidence and, of course, no legal authority for the federal government to seize state voting machines. Here's Mr. Cipollone again denouncing Sidney Powell's terrible idea.
There was a real question in my mind and a real concern, particularly after the Attorney General had reached the conclusion that there wasn't sufficient election fraud to change the outcome of the election. When other people kept suggesting that there was, the answer is, what is it? And at some point, you have to put up or shut up. That was my view.
Why was this, on a broader scale, a bad idea for the country?
To have the federal government seize voting machines, that's a terrible idea for the country. That's not how we do things in the United States. There's no legal authority to do that. And there is a way to contest elections, that happens all the time. But the idea that the federal government could come in and seize election machines, I don't understand why we even have to tell you why that's a bad idea. It's a terrible idea.
For all of its absurdity, the December 18th meeting was critically important because President Trump got to watch up close for several hours as his White House counsel and other White House lawyers destroyed the baseless factual claims and ridiculous legal arguments being offered by Sidney Powell, Mike Flynn, and others. President Trump now knew all these claims were nonsense, not just from his able White House lawyers, but also from his own Department of Justice officials and indeed his own campaign officials. As White House counsel Pat Cipollone told us,
with respect to the whole election fraud issue, that to me it's sort of, if you're going to make those kind of claims, and people were open to them early on because people were making all sorts of claims, and the real question is, show the evidence, okay?
it wasn't just the Justice Department, the Trump campaign, and the Trump White House lawyers who knew it. Even Rudy Giuliani's own legal team admitted that they did not have any real evidence of fraud sufficient to change the election result. Here's an email from Rudy Giuliani's lead investigator, Bernie Kerik, on December 28, 2020, to Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Mr. Kerik did not mince any words. We can do all the investigations we want later, but if the president plans on winning, it's the legislators that have to be moved, and this will do just that. Mr. Kerik wanted the president to win. What he didn't say in this email was what he would later tell the Select Committee in a letter that his lawyer wrote to us in November. The letter said, quote, "It was impossible for Mr. Kerik and his team to determine conclusively whether there was widespread fraud or whether that widespread fraud would have altered the outcome of the election." In other words, even Rudy Giuliani's own legal team knew before January 6th that they hadn't collected enough actual evidence to support any of their stolen election claims. Here's what Trump campaign senior advisor Jason Miller told the committee about some of the so-called evidence of fraud that the campaign had seen from the Giuliani team.
So do you know what the examples of fraud, numbers, names, and supporting evidence was that you sent to Mo Brooks's office? And when I say you, I mean you or the campaign.
There's some very, very general documents as far as say, for example, here are the handful of dead people in several different states. Here are explanations on a couple of the legal challenges as far as saying that the rules were changed in an unconstitutional manner. But it was, to say that it was thin is probably an understatement.
Here's how President Trump's deputy campaign manager described the evidence of fraud that the campaign had seen.
You never came to learn or understand that Mayor Giuliani had produced evidence of election fraud. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And here's testimony that we received from the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, Rusty Bowers, about an exchange that he had with Rudy Giuliani after the election.
At some point, did one of them make a comment that they didn't have evidence, but they had a lot of theories?
That was Mr. Giuliani.
Chief of Staff Mark Meadows told people that he thought Trump should concede around the time the Electoral College certified the result. But nonetheless, he later worked to try to facilitate President Trump's wishes. Here's what Cassidy Hutchinson told us.
During this period, I perceived his goal with all of this to keep Trump in office. He had very seriously and deeply considered the allegations of voter fraud. But when he began acknowledging that maybe there wasn't enough voter fraud to overturn the election, I witnessed him start to explore potential constitutional loopholes more extensively, which I then connected with John Eastman's theories.
The startling conclusion is this: even an agreed upon complete lack of evidence could not stop President Trump, Mark Meadows, and their allies from trying to overturn the results of a free and fair election. So let's return to that meeting at the White House on the evening of December 18. That night, a group showed up at the White House, including Sidney Powell, retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and former Overstock.com CEO Patrick Byrne. After gaining access to the building from a junior White House staffer, the group made their way to the Oval Office. They were able to speak with the president by himself for some time until White House officials learned of the meeting. What ensued was a heated and profane clash between this group and President Trump's White House advisors, who traded personal insults, accusations of disloyalty to the president, and even challenges to physically fight. The meeting would last over 6 hours, beginning here in the Oval Office, moving around the West Wing, and many hours later, ending up in the president's private residence. The Select Committee has spoken with 6 of the participants, as well as staffers who could hear the screaming from outside the Oval Office. What took place next is best told in their own words, as you will see from this video.
Did you believe that it was going to work, that you were going to be able to get to see the president without an appointment?
I had no idea.
In fact, you did get to see the president without an appointment.
We did.
How much time did you have alone with the president? And I say alone, you had other people with you, but
right
from his aides before the crowd came running?
Probably no more than 10 or 15 minutes.
Was in that...
I bet Pat Cipollone set a new land speed record.
I got a call either from Molly or Hirschman that I need to get to the Oval Office.
So that was the first point that I had recognized, okay, there was nobody in there from the White House. Mark's gone. What's going on right now?
I opened the door and I walked in. I saw General Flynn. I saw Sidney Powell sitting there. I was not happy to see the people in the Oval Office.
Explain why.
Well, again, I don't think they were providing. Well, first of all, the Overstock person, I've never knew who this guy was. Actually, the first thing I did, I walked in, I looked at him, and I said, "Who are you?" And he told me. I don't think any of these people were providing the president with good advice, and so I didn't understand how they had gotten in.
In the short period of time that you had with the president, did he seem receptive to the presentation that you were making?
He was very interested in hearing particularly about the CISA finding and the terms of 13848 that apparently nobody else had bothered to inform him of.
I was asking, like, you claiming the Democrats were working with Hugo Chavez, Venezuelans, and whomever else. And at one point, General Flynn took out a diagram that supposedly showed IP addresses all over the world, and who was communicating with whom via the machines, and some comment about like Nest thermostats being hooked up to the internet.
So it's been reported that during this meeting, Ms. Powell talked about Dominion voting machines and made various election fraud claims that involve foreign countries such as Venezuela, Iran, and China. Is that accurate?
That's true.
Was the meeting tense?
Oh, yeah. It was not a casual meeting.
Explain.